The idiot Lord marries 5 beautiful goddesses. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 51. Under the starless abyss of the night, they fight. Alex stood in front of the castle walls while Riya bent her necks. "Please be careful, my lord, and try to return as soon as possible. I will finish things quickly," Alex said, and holding Riya's head, he pulled her closer and gave her a soft kiss on the forehead. "Riya, you take care of yourself too. You are always busy serving me. Get some rest and do what you like. I don't want you to follow me from behind, rather I want to walk beside you and for each of us to take steps together," Alex said as he looked into Riya's beautiful bright eyes and tried to capture her beauty in his heart because he knew that on this trip he was going to miss her dearly. "And you, Leo, the lazy one, take care of my woman. If I see a single wrinkle of worry on her face, I will beat you up." Leo's lips twitched a few times and he wanted to protest, but seeing Alex's sharp gaze, he jumped up and snuggled into Riya's arms. Riya chuckled and said, "My lord, please don't bully him." Alex frowned and thought, "This bastard is keeping an eye on my position. I'll teach him a lesson when I return." Alex could see Riya's worried and anxious look as she tried to hold back her tears from bursting out. Leaving Riya and going to the western region was also difficult for Alex, as without her lovely presence, he was sure he would feel lonely. But still, he had to leave. After all, it was his duty to look after the kingdom's safety. Furthermore, he wasn't the only one leaving his loved ones behind. All of his soldiers were in the same position, some leaving their wives and children behind while others leaving their elderly parents behind for the safety of the kingdom and families. Alex walked under the heavily armored formation. All of them were covered in battle armor and all of them had weapons made of steel, and the quality of those weapons was incomparable to the ones they had previously. All the soldiers raised their swords, forming a cone under which Alex walked and rode his horse. All the citizens have gathered to watch their king's march. Many even threw flowers at him and wished him luck on his journey. The soldiers' armor and swords were shining and reflecting the bright light of the sun. Alex smiled and waved his hands, even winking at several ladies whose weak hearts couldn't survive Alex's charms. What he didn't know was that sweet gesture of his wouldn't remain hidden from Riya's sharp eyes, and that an unforgettable calamity was going to befall Alex. The sky was black like an abyss without the twinkling of stars, yet it looked like a work of art. Under the starless sky, the soldiers marched in unison while their faces were as white as the moon. Alex rode his horse and enjoyed the beautiful scenery that surrounded him and captured him in his heart. He made sure to enjoy himself to his heart's content as he activated his breathing technique and was in a meditative state. The soldiers guarding beside him surrounded him so that there would be no disturbances or attacks from any monsters. They were amazed at Alex, who was able to achieve peace of mind even when he was riding a horse. There were many carriages following them. One was for Alex and the other carried his weapons and equipment, but Alex refused to sit inside the carriage and rode the horse with him. Every time the pleasant cold wind blew, the leaves would disperse under the blanket of autumn. Alex's long blonde hair fluttered as the gentle wind passed by him, accompanied by pink-leafed blossoms falling on him as if congratulating him for heeding the call of nature and arriving there. The mana in the air condensed around him and began to swirl around him and was quickly absorbed like a black hole by his lungs, which passed through his body. Alex didn't know if the season had changed because of the weather or because they arrived in the western region, which was in stark contrast to the hot and humid climate of the east, but Alex was mesmerized by this place. But deep in his heart he knew that it was all a facade. The charming beauty of the forest is just a veil under which countless dangerous beasts and monsters rest. Hoping for people to be enchanted by the scenic beauty under the starless night, they will come out with all their might and crush them without any mercy. That was why Alex ordered his soldiers to resume marching instead of camping. Each of them had their guard up, and as they went too far into the forest, they could hear the rustling of leaves, which intensified the strange feeling crawling under their skin. Alex suddenly stopped as he felt many heartbeats surrounding them. He raised his head and stopped walking. "Soldiers, take position," Alex shouted. At Alex's call, an outer perimeter of people with shields formed, consisting of tanks while archers readied their bows. Alex raised his bow and closing one of his eyes, he fired an arrow. With a whistle, the arrow flew through the wind. An instant after the arrow was fired, a loud bang was heard that shook the entire area. The soldiers were stunned by Alex's shot. They only carried torches that could illuminate about 10 meters around them, and beyond that they could not see anything, but their king shot down the beast from such a distance without seeing the target. "They're coming," Alex shouted. Following his call, numerous loud growls were heard, breaking the silence that reigned in the forest. Tack, tack, tack. The soldier heard the cracking of twigs and saw a large pack of wolves running frantically towards them. Rushing towards them, they pounced on the people in front wielding the shield. As they pounced on the prey, they slammed their claws on the shield, and as their sharp claws collided with the shield, sparks flew. The men in front were pushed back a few steps, but they did not let the line of defense fall. As the wild wolf raised its paw and was about to attack again, an arrow flew and pierced its eye. Just like that wolf, many wolves were struck down by the rain of arrows. Seeing the wolf being caught unguarded by the archers, the defenders took out the shield and raised it over the wolves, smashed their heads with the shield and beat the heads of the nasty wolves until their heads were turned to pulp. Chapter 52, The Wolf Pack Assault. As they stood in formation, Alex shot arrows at the wolves and many of them backed away and growled in pain as the arrows pierced their bodies. With their formation, they were able to take out many in one go, but their defenses didn't last long as one wolf shot ice spikes at them. Alex noticed the wolf condensing mana and was about to use magic. "Ben!" Alex shouted. Hearing Alex's call, a figure shot out like a gust of wind that passed the soldiers and came to the front and cut off the spikes. The spikes were cut off by the attack and disappeared. Ben took command and led out a small group of soldiers to deal with the wolf pack while Max defended the other region from the wolves' attacks. Alex lamented to see that his hands had been tied. If it wasn't for taking charge of the army, he would have rushed ahead. Besides, he wanted to see Ben and Max in action. After all, he can't feed them all the time. But that didn't mean he was helpless, and he pulled out his bow and shot arrows one after another. If an arrow hits a wolf that is killed by another, Alex would receive a share of the experience points depending on the beast's rank and its contribution. But when Alex saw their numbers growing and stronger ones starting to appear, he feared that his squad would be trapped and might suffer casualties if this continued. "Ben, go back and take command from here. Max and I will clear the way," Alex ordered. Alex was happy that Ben had good commanding ability unlike the muscular Max. Alex jumped up, pulled out his sword, and ran forward. He grabbed a shield as a safety measure to later use as a weapon. When they heard Alex's hurried footsteps, the wolf pack thought that this human was a fool as he came alone unlike the other warriors. The wolf pack ran towards Alex as he was delighted to see the huge experience of the plate of food. "Eat a taki mash." Alex thanked them in Japanese style for the experience the plate of food had provided him and threw the shield with all his strength forward. The huge shield spun in a spinning motion and shot towards the wolf at high speed. Boom! The wolves were swept away as something flew over and hit them with enormous force, sending them flying into the air. The shield crashed down and crushed the wolves, killing some in the process and dragging them away, the shield getting stuck in the tree trunk. Alex stopped on the ground, channeling his strength into his legs and launched himself forward. His body shot out like a cannon and slashed at the wolf who was struggling to get up after being hit by the shield. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Heads flew and rolled on the ground with each swing of Alex's sword. A wolf jumped onto the tree trunk and pounced on Alex. Alex pulled out the shield and defended himself from the attack and struck the wolf's guts and threw it using its momentum against itself, and jumping on it, he stabbed his sword and pierced its skull and killed it. You have killed a wolf of higher shield rank. You have gained 150 experience points. You have leveled up. Alex looked at his stats. Name: Alex von Stan. Species: Human. English. Rank: None. Level 16. EXP 4250. Horsepower 60 mana 0. Strength 34. Agility 31. Stamina 32. Vitality 30. Stat points 26. Active skills: Eyes of Truth, unlocked. Mana Sensor, unlocked. Emperor's Charisma, locked. Emperor's Pressure, locked. Goddess Fortuna's Blessing, locked. Healing, locked. Restoration, locked. Goddess Enhancement, locked. Passive skills: Piercing Thrust LV0, Heavy Iron Swordsmanship LV0, Abyssal Slash LV0, Great Martial Arts LV0, Powerful Punch LV0, Spell, locked. 5 Elements Breathing Technique LV. G. As Alex looked at the status screen and nodded in satisfaction, he heard another loud growl from the wolf coming towards him. Alex looked at them and said, "They are like a moth running to the flame." Alex galloped towards him, and before colliding with him, he simply slid to the ground, raising his sword and allowing it to cut through. The wolf's side was hit by the sword, and as Alex pierced through it, its insides were ripped out. As Alex stood up, his pupil constricted and the hair on his body stood up as he felt a sense of crisis. The leader of the pack, the alpha wolf, was coming towards them. He could feel the strong presence of the alpha wolf running towards them. Alex realized that he had gotten quite far away from his group and ran towards them. Ben, who was leading the charge, heard a loud, ear-piercing scream that made the hairs on his body stand up in fear. Ben scanned the surroundings and tried to sense the enemies, but he didn't need to look far as he saw a flash of lightning making its way through the forest, as his entire body made a crackling noise and lightning bolts shot out from his body and lit up the surroundings. It was at that moment that a flash of blue lightning shot out from the forest and headed towards them. Max stood in front of the unit and used his giant axe to block the blow like a shield, but the lightning still sent him a few meters back, and he crashed into the defenders and pushed them back with him. It was at that moment that Ben moved like lightning, and his sword blazed with a sizzling fire, making a crackling sound and slicing through the wolves that were in front of them. All the wolves within a 10-meter radius of the attack were burned to ashes. "Hey, idiot. Did you forget we're in the forest?" Ben woke up from his stupor when he heard Max's loud scream from behind and looked around to see the forest was on fire. "Shit," Ben cursed as he forgot about it in the heat of the moment while trying to save the gun command. Even though Alex repeated that one must always fight with the environment in mind, making a mistake like this is a crime. But Ben didn't have to think about it. As a flash of light, a huge beast whose body flashed in lightning and growled, letting out a huge shrill cry that was followed by a strong gale of wind that blew and extinguished most of the burning flames. Ben and all the soldiers looked at the beast with a terrified look. It was much larger than the other wolves, and had bluish fur that seemed to harden to form blades and scales along with huge beastly claws, and its body was covered in lightning. Chapter 53, Wolfpack Assault, Sigma vs Alpha. Gulp. The sound of gulping could be heard as they saw the pack leader making his presence felt. Ben, at most, can take hits against an early disciple rank warrior, while the pack leader seems to be at the mid or peak disciple rank and can wield fierce magic. In addition to his strength, he seems to have elemental power and could use lightning magic. The wolf rolled his eyes and saw that many of his kin were dead while others were fighting to finish off the group, and then looked at Ben with his sharp gaze. Ben sensed the threat, but the fear of dying didn't stop him. He had suffered a fate worse than death when Dordan's men kidnapped and tortured him. He raised his sword that was accompanied by flames and leapt towards the huge wolf. The wolf simply growled, looking at the weak, pointed weapon, and simply slashed with its paw from afar. As the wolf leader slashed, a strong bolt of lightning struck Ben, and his figure was thrown by the lightning and crashed into the tree, making a dent in the tree trunk, vomiting blood. "Bean!" Max roared in anger and lunged at the wolf, but the wolf simply howled with all its might and blew Max away like a twig. Max felt his eardrums burst and fell to the ground, coughing up blood. The wolf let out a low growl, and the low-level pack that received its signal charged towards the prey as they salivated at the delicious meal they were going to eat today. The soldiers with shields rushed to defend Max, who was quite helpless as he tried to get up on shaky legs. The wolf that was running towards Max was about to pounce on Max, but his eyeball twitched as a sudden burst of pressure shot through his body as if an arrow had been shot from somewhere, and his body was cut and split into pieces that fell to the ground and slid over him for a distance. Alex's figure appeared beside Ben and patted him with a satisfied smile. "All of you have already won the battle. All of you have already conquered the fear of death and triumphed over it, which is the greatest battle fought by any living being. In front of it, what does this insignificant battle mean?" Alex had appeared quite early, but he didn't make his move to test the soldiers he would have chosen. In front of the enemy that cannot be defeated, there will always be some people who will abandon their comrades and run away, but there were none among them. Everyone remained in formation even after seeing the power of the leader of the dire wolf pack. Alex gave the sword to Max and took his giant axe and said, "Today, we will find the answer to the long-sought question. Come on, fellow Alpha, let's have an Alpha versus Sigma fight." "Oh, host, you have reached the epitome of the chunny boy Deo that this poor soul cannot comprehend." Alex rubbed his nose upon hearing the system's praise, but the next moment his illusion was dispelled as the system began to curse with all the knowledge it had accumulated and preach the Deo of cursing using foul language. "Host, can you not be serious in a life-threatening situation? Just because you were busy chasing after women in your previous life and failed to live out your chunna boy life, you don't have to behave like one in this life. Shut your mouth, you bastard," Alex yelled and spoke. "This is not being a chunna boy. This is called the Deo of awesomeness, Alex ignored the system that busied itself with cursing Alex for 7 generations as Alex looked at the leader of the dire wolf with a solemn expression. Range wasn't the problem, but the elemental magic he used to shoot lightning made him harder to deal with. Alex called for another axe and clashing both together, he charged towards the wolf who seemed to neglect his presence. Since he can't sense any sense of mana or any pressure from Alex, he thinks of him as a little man whom he can crush with just a wave of his hands. As Alex charged towards the boss dire wolf, he saw a bolt of lightning shot towards him by the dire wolf with a bored expression. Alex swung his axe towards the incoming attack and reflected the bolt of lightning. The bolt of lightning was deflected from his axe and struck the tree trunk, and with a mini explosion, it burned the tree trunk. The dire wolf's eyes glowed for a moment as he saw the small human deflect his strike and shoot out many bolts of lightning. The entire forest resonated with thunderous and crackling sounds that lit up the forest and cleared the darkness of the night for an instant. Alex simply watched the lightning coming towards him and raised both axes. He swung his right foot and used the momentum to swing the axes and rotate his body at high speed and deflect the lightning strikes. At each strike of the huge axe, a strike was deflected which hit a nearby tree or the ground and a crack appeared on it. The dire wolf's expression finally changed, and he stepped forward and let out a maddening roar that shook the entire forest, and a blast of pressure fell upon Alex that seemed to pin him to the ground. Alex looked at the attack that seemed like barbarian war cries, and instead of retreating, he charged towards the dire wolf, stomping the ground. As the wolf launched a blast of pressure towards him from the maddened cry, Alex raised his axe and swung it towards the dire wolf with all his might. Swoosh! The air in front of Alex was torn apart along with the powerful pressure coming towards him and split into 2 halves. With his strength alone, he cut through everything in his path. An invisible arc of sharpness seemed to radiate from his axe that shot towards the wolf, shattering the ground. The wolf's pupil contracted and he jumped to dodge the blow. Boom! Chapter 54, The Wolfpack Assault 3. The ground in front of Alex split, and a long fissure appeared which formed cracks and extended towards the place where the wolf was previously present. He crashed into the tree trunk. The tree trunk was too weak before Alex attacked and was crushed and cut into pieces. The trunk broke into pieces and the tree fell to the ground with a loud crash. The dire wolf finally sensed the danger from the human whom he had previously seen as a small ant. He decided to take things seriously from now on. Otherwise this human might be his nemesis, and he jumped on Alex and slashed him with his sharp claws. Alex used the axe as a shield to block the attack and defend himself. Clanking. Sparks flew as the sharp metal claw collided with the sharp edges of the axe. Alex raised the other axe with his other hand and threw it towards the wolf. Contrary to Alex's expectations, he opened his snout and bit the axe with his strong jaw and sharp fangs, producing a loud clanking sound. Alex channeled his strength and tried to pull out the axe, but the wolf bit down on him and held on to it tighter and used his other paw to send out more a bolt of lightning. Alex's pupil made contact and he tried to pull out his axe, but before he could do so, the lightning struck him and pushed him back. Alex tried to muster all his strength to remain standing even after taking the blow, but he felt a sudden stab of pain. He felt a quick spasm and alternating twitch in his muscles and felt his hands go numb from the blow, but unlike others, he didn't fly back or spurt blood. He made a stretching gesture with his hand and cracked his numb neck. Huh. It's been a long time since I fought a tough fight. Until now, all I did was fight weaklings here and there, Alex muttered. Alex took a deep breath and raised his axe, slashing from a distance. The dire wolf felt a sense of danger and jumped back and forth. Every time Alex swung his axe, a huge arc of pressure would emerge from his axe that was created from pure strength that had reached the level of disciple rank. This move was done with a sword. Every day, Alex would perform thousands of slashes with the same technique. The pressure would condense to form a wind blade with pure strength alone, which upon passing or colliding would cut through the trees in the forest cleanly. The dire wolf launched its lightning attack and bolts of lightning were shot towards Alex that collided with the wind blades. Boom. 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 The lightning and wind blades collided with each other and many explosions occurred that shook the entire area. Dust and debris flew everywhere and small craters were formed. The dire wolf was pushed back and Alex fired wind blades one after another as he swung his axe crazily without a care in the world. As dust covered his vision, the dire wolf suddenly made an axe fly and headed straight for him. He dodged the axe that hit the ground and threw it with enormous force. But the wolf quickly regained its balance in midair, but Alex's figure appeared above it and quickly slashed it with the other axe. The dire wolf jumped in panic, But Alex swung the axe with one hand and grabbed its tail, pulling it back. An electric shock ran through his body, causing his hand to go numb when it touched its tail, but he didn't let go and swung his axe. Woo-woo. The wolf groaned in pain as the axe hit its back, and it flailed and slashed with both paws at Alex. Alex pulled out the axe and shielded himself. Clang. The wolf's strength surpasses Alex's, and one of his knees buckles to the ground, he was on cracks from the wolf's attack. The wolf tried to crush him with all its might. Alex gritted his teeth, and seeing the disadvantageous situation, he quickly put 4 stat points into strength and 2 into stamina. Alex felt a warm sensation running through his body and felt his muscles getting stronger, and the pressure exerted on him by the wolf became insignificant. He shook the axe, pushed the wolf back, pulled the axe back and swung it over his head. Crack! A cracking sound was heard as the axe cracked a wolf's skull, but seeing that it was still alive, Alex pulled the axe back and struck the wolf's head again and again. Boom! 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 Strong shockwaves were emitted as Alex mercilessly struck the wolf, and continued to do so until he received the notification. In fact, he had received the notification a long time ago, but he was too absorbed in the moment to see it. You have killed an intermediate level dire wolf. You have obtained 500 experience points. Additional experience points for defeating an elementalist beast. Oh, how nice. So, the system has finally recognized my Deo of genius and rewarded me. Alex pulled out his axe and looked back to see his soldiers staring at him with a terrified look. While the wolves that lost their leader had gone mad, some fled in fear while others tried to rush towards the human to kill and tear him apart. Alex looked at the approaching pack of wolves and then looked at his people, who were standing there watching the scene unfold. Alex gritted his teeth in anger and shouted, "Morons, do you want an invitation to come here and clean up the rest of the pack? Am I your boss or your lackey? Don't you know that usually the boss takes out the strongest threat and the lackey takes out the rest?" Hearing Alex's words, they woke up from their stupor and ran to fight while Alex's shout could be heard from behind. "You morons, keep your formation. I'll cut your pay if this happens next time." On the outskirts of the forest, a group of people were hunting small animals for their daily food. The leader of the group was in his 30s while the rest looked to be in their 20s. There were 5 of them who used a spear to take down the opponent. They had just finished hunting a wild boar using traps and many other means which tired them out quite a bit, and were about to take a break when they heard a crumbling sound. The man in his 30s stood up upon seeing the disturbance and shouted at the top of his lungs to run. "Run for your lives. Leave the food." A huge bear emerged from the undergrowth and ran towards them. It passed by the dead wild boar and chased after the human. He thought that since the boar was already his, it wouldn't be bad to eat humans as an appetizer. A boy who had just turned 20 tripped and fell and tried to get up, but the bear running on all 4s appeared near him and cut off his paw. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55, Steelfield Fortress. The other people stopped as they saw their youngest member fall to the ground, but they were helpless against a bear, and going near it would only make them its meal. But the man in his 30s did not give up and ran towards the boy to save him, but he was too slow to reach him, and the bear reached the boy first and waved its paw. The boy closed his eyes in fear and thought he was going to die. But before the bear could reach him, an arrow was shot from afar which appeared out of nowhere before the bear and pierced its eye. The bear roared in pain and was about to thrash around waving its paw when the figure of a man appeared who raised his huge axe over the bear's head and cut it down. The axe pierced the bear-shaped butter and split it in 2. The boy was horrified as he watched the scene. He himself didn't know what horrified him more, the crazed charge of a bear coming for his life, or that man who appeared out of nowhere and cut through the bear like he was cutting butter. Max wiped the blood off his face and put on a gentle smile that wasn't gentle in any sense to the bystander watching him. Instead of thinking of him as a hero, he looked more like a demon. Max was about to start a conversation when he got hit on the head. Max flinched as he saw Alex looking at him with a rotten expression, as if someone had stolen his money. "Your Highness." Before Max could say anything, Alex kicked him away, pulled the broken arrow out of the bear's carcass and petted it. "Oh, my poor son," Alex said with a sad expression and looked at Max and scolded them. "Do you think money grows on trees? How dare you break my precious arrow? Do you know that each of these arrows would sell for 2 silver coins? You forgot the value of 2 silver coins just because your profits increased? How dare you? Max didn't know what to say as he saw Alex's angry look. Your Highness, wouldn't the weapon get damaged if we used it in war? Max tried to refute. So, you're saying that if I have tons of money, I should just go around throwing money around? Alex grumbled and put the arrow back into the quiver and looked at the boy who seemed to be similar to him. Are you okay? Alex asked. Yes. Thank you for saving me. I'll make sure to pay you back for it, the boy said and began to take out his small wallet in fear. You can reward me by guiding us to Steelfield Fortress. We've gotten lost and we're in dire need of help and someone's guidance to get there, Alex said. When did we get lost? Max howled but was forced to stop his sentence midway. Before Max could finish his speech, Ben wrapped his shoulder around his neck, shut his mouth and looked at the boy and said, I meant that we don't even know how we lost our way. The man in his 30s looked at the group of people and asked who they were, only to get the answer that they were reinforcements that had arrived there to help fend off the beasts. Alex, with his new companions finally leading the way, arrived at the fortress after much hustle and bustle. The Steelfield Fortress, whose house had been guarding the western mountain pass against the beasts of the forest for generations. In the western region, there was the Lowren Mountain along with a massive forest. Beyond the mountain and the forest were the morons from the Bright Kingdom who were starting to get on Alex's nerves lately. If it wasn't for the current state of Nevin, Alex would have already chased after the Bright Kingdom's king boss who was trying to mess with his kingdom by attempting to sabotage the situation in Nevin. Although the territory of Steelfield was one of the places whose borders were shared with the Bright Kingdom, the place was of great importance to both kingdoms. Dangers and many fortunes lurked here. According to the saying, the huge number of monster and beast invasions also brings with it many fortunate encounters. The corpse of the monster and beast was of great use, and if a core was found then it was just the icing on the cake. In addition, in the depths of the forest, many herbs and medicinal substances could be found that could be sold for a good price or potions could be made from. Alex looked at the massive fortress wall on which the trace of the passage of time could be seen. The wall had withstood many battles, had seen many soldiers bask in glory, and was still standing the test of time. Except for some small cracks and dents, the sturdy walls reached 40 meters in height. Inside was a small town or citadel and the only entrance was a huge gate. Many villages near the fortress generally stayed outside even though there was a great risk to their lives, but they couldn't abandon their culture. Each village had its own meaning, where people lived either hunting or performing jobs in Steelfield City. Alex and 100 brave warriors stood before the huge city gates. Exhaustion could be seen on their faces because they had fought all the way here. Alex even carried the corpse and brought the head of the pack leader as a trophy so that the people here wouldn't think they were soft rice. For people who were involved in military service, it's better to show their glory and valor through deeds rather than flowers and flattering words that will disgust the soldiers who fight risking their lives while many are sleeping comfortably. The guards on the city wall looked down and asked for confirmation. Alex took off his royal regalia and showed them as they are. The huge metal gate opened and as he entered, he saw a large number of soldiers armed with weapons standing to the side leaving a space in the middle for them to walk through. As soon as Alex's horse took a step forward, they bowed and shouted, "Hail to the king!" Alex waved his hand and smiled to calm them down, though inside he was scared for a moment and thought they were going to attack him with those huge numbers. There were at least 400 or 500 more soldiers stationed here. Half of them were former Nevin soldiers, and the other half belonged to the private knights of Steelfield. In the middle of the group of soldiers, a man with a long white beard knelt down beside a woman. Behind them, 2 boys and a girl knelt down showing respect to Alex. Alex got off the horse and asked them to stand up. He stood in front of Count Steelfield and raising his hands to shake them said, "Uncle Hamilton, thank you for taking care of Nevin. Without you, I don't think Nevin would have survived until now." Hamilton felt as if he knew his nephew seeing Alex's gesture and the way he called out to him. "Ho ha ho ha," Hamilton laughed and said, "You should thank the gods for being able to recover. If you didn't get up early, I don't think an old person like me would be able to keep the borders safe. Your Highness came here and met my family. This is my wife Lena and beside her are my 2 sons Ian and Charles and my lovely daughter Ava." Alex nodded and gently bowed to the Countess and they exchanged some jokes which made the Countess laugh while the Hamilton children, although they seemed a little cold and distant, there was no animosity between them. Alex was happy to see that there were no hard feelings between them and Alex. They just consider him an outsider because Alex is younger than him. Both of them were in their 20s and had reached the rank of disciples. While his daughter was 11, it would take her a few months to awaken the mana. And what made Alex happy was that the meeting didn't turn out like a typical cliché where one of the children would hate the protagonist and play pranks on him to make him look down on others, and once his actions were revealed, he would be disowned and soon become a villain who would go far. Chapter 56, Defending the Beast Tide. Alex exchanged greetings with all of them and Hamilton asked Ian to show them around. Alex ordered his soldiers to get some rest and make themselves comfortable. After all, who knows when a bloody battle might start again. Alex followed Ian, who explained a little about the fortress. They were Nevin's shield that blocked the route of a monster that lived in the mountain and the Addis Edge forest. Their troops were divided into many small squads and scout groups. The rangers would actively search for the location of the monsters and dangers approaching them, while a garrison of soldiers would rotate shifts to eliminate the monsters and kill the ferocious beasts. If things get out of hand, it will be time for Count Steelfield to step in. Most of the monsters are in the range of squire and disciple. There may be powerful monsters in the depths of the forest, but they don't come out often. There are cases where a master rank monster lost its way and came to attack, but his father took care of it. That was how things were, but recently the number of monsters seems to have increased greatly and there seems to be unrest among the monsters. Alex listened to everything attentively and pondered for a moment and said, "Ian, what do you think about the possibility of a war breaking out within the forest?" Ian looked at Alex with a confused look and asked, "What do you mean by that? Just like us, monsters should have their territory. What if a group of monsters wanted to conquer other lands and a bloody war broke out and these weaker ones had fled here?" Hearing Alex's explanation, Ian's eyes widened because what Alex said could be quite plausible. Inside the massive fortress, Alex was treated to a grand welcoming ceremony. Alex looked at the massive buffet on the table and asked, "There was no need to do this." "Your Majesty, I'm doing this because once those damn monsters start their rampage, you'll barely have time to eat. So enjoy as much as you can." After the warm greeting and merry dinner, Alex and Hamilton along with a few people sat in the middle of a serious discussion. They had barely begun to operate the contents when the entire fortress shook with a loud trumpet. Hamilton slapped his forehead and muttered that it had started. Alex frowned and said, "Do they attack at night?" "Mostly," Hamilton replied. Alex nodded with an expression that indicated he understood his life was going to be shit now. When Alex reached the top of the walls, he saw a large number of monsters. It looked like an endless sea of monsters making their way here. Alex looked up at the sky and saw bat-like creatures flying towards him. The only fortunate thing was that on top of the castle there was a bastille, so they could be shot. The nearby residents and villagers, under the leadership of knights and soldiers, responded quickly and finished the evacuation. The archer had already taken his position to interrupt the bat monster. "If only I had awakened the mana, I would have roasted them with fire," Alex muttered as he took out his bow and an arrow from his quiver and began shooting. The bats did not notice this and flapped their wings towards the fort, where they believed they were feeding to regain strength and continue on. But their dreams didn't last long. As the bats neared the fortress, the huge rubber rope on the bastille was pulled back and a huge wooden arrow was shot out. Hiss! The arrow was much larger than the bat monsters, whose sizes were similar to the vultures in Alex's previous life, but they were much larger than normal bats. The arrow hit a group of bats and took down 10 of them in one go. Hiss! Hiss, hiss, hiss. One after another, large arrows were shot out that shot like cannons, tearing the bats apart, which burst like watermelons upon hitting the huge arrow. If this wasn't enough, the archers began to fire arrows that rained down on the bats. The arrows hit their wings and tore them off. The bats screamed and shrieked and fell, unable to maintain their flight, and were crushed by the monsters rushing down. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Alex clicked his tongue a few times in annoyance as he shot the arrow. Most of the bats weren't even ranked and killing them didn't give him any experience. He'd already passed that level and could now only gain experience by killing ranked warriors. And if there were any squire-ranked bats, these wooden arrows were of no use in killing them. A horde of bats managed to break through the arrow rain defense and headed towards the city wall, but before they could get past it, Ian jumped off the wall and his figure shot out like a cannon and appeared before the bat, cutting it into pieces and killing the other one. "I should do that too," Alex muttered and began to follow the idea and jumped off the walls. In one leap, he traveled 20 meters and slashed with his sword. A highly compressed wind blade, born due to Alex's strength, was shot towards the bats and cut them into pieces. You have killed a squire who changes rank in the early stages of the game. You have gained 50 experience points. You have killed a squire who changes rank in the early stages of the game. You have gained 50 experience points. You have killed a squire who changes rank in the early stages of the game. You have gained 50 experience points. You have killed a mid-level squire bat. You have gained 100 experience points. You have killed a mid-level squire bat. You have gained 100 experience points. You have killed a squire who changes rank in the early stages of the game. You have gained 50 experience points. You have leveled up. Alex's eyes lit up as he saw the series of notifications that looked as if money had been deposited into his bank while he was on his killing spree. Chapter 57, Defending Against the Beasts. After fighting for quite some time, the number of aerial monsters began to decrease slightly, but still, a bloody battle was raging beneath the fortress wall. Alex didn't forget to keep an eye on his battalion, who looked pretty good even if this was their first battle on such a large scale. Before heading out, Alex repeatedly warned them not to get carried away and became furious. After all, for now only he had that privilege. On a large battlefield, it is necessary to stay in order, maintain formation, and stay close. Being scattered on the battlefield is the worst mistake an army can make. Coordination between the group of soldiers is the most important thing on the battlefield. Now that the aerial ones have been dealt with, it is time for him to have some fun on the descent. In front of the fortress the situation was chaos. The entire ground was soaked in blood and it stank, causing a feeling of nausea. Those who are inexperienced on the battlefield would even find it difficult to breathe. Even some of the soldiers on Alex's side felt like vomiting, but they still controlled their impulses, trying to hold back the vomit. Ben was taking the lead while Max dealt with troublesome opponents. But after a few hours of fighting, the flaws in them were quite evident. The soldiers and knights on Steelfield's side were still fighting as hard as before, but the soldiers in Alex's squad were already worn out and exhausted. Unlike others, they pushed themselves from the start and exhausted their stamina, while the soldiers on the Count's side, having gone through countless battles, conserved their strength and used minimal force to deal with the monsters. Max cut down the monsters one after another, tightened his grip on the axe held, and lunged towards a two-headed snake. The two-headed snake jumped at Max, but Max was quite fast and using his muscles, he swung the axe horizontally, wanting to smash everything in front of him. Slash. The two-headed snake's body was torn apart by Max's blow and split into two halves, but the two separated halves did not die and lunged towards Max from both directions. Max was caught off guard by the snake's sudden maneuver and was caught off guard, unable to choose how to defend himself. But before the snakes could bare their fangs, two spears flew in their direction and pierced the snakes' heads. Max, back off. You've gone too far, Ben shouted. Max heard the call and, panting heavily, made a great leap towards his group. In his path, many began to lunge at him. Max simply held his axe and squeezed it tightly. Veins began to appear on his arms and his muscles bulged and contracted as if he had lifted a heavy weight and swung the axe as it spun through the air. Anyone who came close to him was torn apart by the spinning axe and blood splattered all around. Thump, 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 thump. With a great noise, many pieces of corpses fell to the ground and Max finally landed near his group. His legs gave way for a moment and putting his axe down on the ground, he leaned on it, taking deep, heavy breaths. Ben ordered the defender and the spearman to move forward and cover Max to allow him to recover. Clammo. Tang. Tang. The sound of clashing was heard throughout the battle as the 300 groups of people faced an army of monsters. The sound of the trumpet was heard from the fortress. Every 2 hours there would be a rotation of the soldiers so that they would not overexert themselves and would recover their stamina in 2 hours of rest. Ben maintained the formation and ordered the squad to retreat and fall back. He had 50 people with him and the next group would be commanded by the king himself. Hearing the trumpets and the signal, they began to slowly retreat. Seeing the humans in front of them retreat, the beast became more violent and frenzied because they thought that the humans were exhausted. Only if they knew that with their retreat, a crazy psychopath would make his presence felt would they simply run away from there. A single wave of lightning streaked across the sky, making a crackling sound as it tore through the group of people. It seemed to be a magical attack performed by a beast that summoned lightning upon them. Max and Ben decided to take control as they saw the flash of lightning appear before them, but a figure appeared before them who raised the huge hammer and used it as a shield to block the lightning. Since metal was a conductor, lightning streaked through it, but before it could discharge, The silhouette that appeared above them disappeared in an instant and appeared above the swarm of monsters. The man raised a hammer and smashed it into the ground with all his might. AUMM. A loud boom was heard and the entire area shook and rumbled, emitting a huge shockwave. The beast and monster were swept away by the powerful explosion, and a shockwave of lightning spread across the area, which stunned the beast and monster, who were within a 20-meter radius. Anyone below the shield bearer's range was immediately turned into a mist of blood even before they could let out a scream, and those who were struck by lightning, or were still alive, even after being blown away, would let out a shrill scream that echoed around the area. Dust and debris flew from the impact, and as the dust dispersed, a huge pit was formed, and within it, Alex stood holding a huge hammer and looking at the surrounding monster, who was momentarily startled by the sight of his companion turning into a mist of blood. Alex smiled as he saw the monster's reactions and muttered, "Fear must exist and fear must be shown and expressed. When you face me, fear will be the only thing that will make you feel alive. After all, even before everyone can rampage, I will turn you all into meat paste." Chapter 58. It would be rude to ignore them. With Alex taking the reins, his people were able to return safely, and a new group of soldiers appeared behind him, who were quite fresh and brimming with energy. Alex ordered them to stay together and support each other and only fight those who came near them and attack them. Alex made his way through the horde of monsters, smashing everything in his path. Everything that appeared before him was either blown away by the wind or crushed by the hammer. The hammer was made of stainless steel along with some other metals and weighed around 500 kilograms. By Alex's measurement, by now, Alex has the strength to lift 400 kilograms in each hand, and if needed, he can gnash his teeth and force his body to reach close to 500 kilograms in each hand. He swung the hammer and spun around, delivering blow after blow. There was a large number of beasts coming at him, and there were no missed blows. Every time he swung the massive hammer, bone-crunching sounds could be heard, and anyone who came within Alex's radius was sent flying. Making his way through, Alex finally sensed the presence of stronger ones that seemed to control the tide of beasts. They had reached the rank of disciples, and there were 3 or 4 of them. Alex dragged the hammer and rushed towards the huge beast that was giving the knights trouble by blowing air and creating a windstorm with its huge trunk. After giving the instruction, Alex leaped forward and smashed the incoming Elephantalish with a hammer. AUMM. A loud cracking sound was heard, and the Elephantalish was forced to take a few steps back. It felt like Alex's blow had broken its skull and it was unable to lift its trunk. As Alex was going to deliver the final blow, she felt a piercing claw heading straight for her throat. Alex pulled the long handle of the hammer back, spun it around, and swung it to protect herself. The hammer made a full turn and emerged from the other side and struck the beast with such a strong force that it knocked it unconscious. The beast was a shadow panther that made an attack by hiding in the shadow, but how was it able to remain hidden from Alex's mono detector? As Alex faced the Elephantalish and a shadow panther, a huge flame was shot towards Alex. She didn't care about the other beasts. As long as the human died, she didn't care about the loot. Boom! The flame erupted in front of Alex, and the surrounding temperature shot up a few degrees, and a small explosion occurred. "Your Highness! Your Highness!" Screams were heard from both Alex's soldiers and the steel-filled knights as they saw Alex hit by the huge flames and wanted to rush to help. Swish! With a loud stomp that shook the earth, a figure was launched into the sky. The direction of his leap was towards the beast that shot out the fire. Appearing at the top, Alex roared, "Die!" With a loud shout, he raised his hammerhead and smashed it into the beast. The muscles on his arms bulged and contracted to the maximum to increase his strength to the limit. Bang! The ground trembled from the blow, and the beast was crushed into meat paste under the weight of a hammer and Alex's strength. A series of notifications appeared before Alex's eyes. "You have killed a mid-level fire hippo. You have gained 250 experience points." The soldiers saw Alex safe and sound and ran towards their king, but stopped when they saw Alex's cold gaze, which sent a chill down their spine. "Go back." Alex's order was like a war from God that no one can refuse, and the soldiers began to gather in formation. Atop the fortress, Ian and Hamilton watched the scene and were amazed by the way Alex commands his troops. The troops' coordination was quite good, and they were quite skilled in their assessments, as they coordinated in an orderly manner to rotate the warriors and defeat them. Most of the time, the defender will remain in front to delay the attack, followed by the spearman taking control, and then the swordsman will provide backup, and these two will rotate in turns depending on the situation. Although it's not like they were perfect and could execute the instructions perfectly. Thinking about Nevin's current status, it can be said that this soldier is quite elite. Hamilton shuddered at the thought of all of them reaching the rank of disciple. Orderly and well-trained disciples, like these, with a rank of around 2,000, can wreak havoc. The minimum level of a kingly soldier is that of a master. With a rank of disciple, one can only be a recruit in training. But one must keep in mind that it hadn't even been 2 months since Alex woke up from the coma, and many changes had already taken place. If this continues and things progress at a rapid pace, Alex will surely elevate Nevin to an unfathomable height. "Ian, did you see that?" Hamilton asked. "Yes, Father," Ian nodded. "His Highness isn't as simple as he seems. He sees the situation differently. Instead of hiding inside the formation, he's fighting alone. I think you should follow him. This place is too small for you. I want you to spread your wings. Under His Highness's leadership and farsightedness, you'll surely become strong." Ben and Max heard Count Hamilton praise their king and nearly vomited blood. They knew that Alex was just fighting for fun and Hamilton's reasons were far from the truth. While others saw the beasts as a danger, all Alex could see was the XP, tons of experience that had come to help him level up. "Since they came to help me, it would be rude for me to ignore them." Chapter 59, Eliminating the Goblins. The night finally fends off the monsters and beasts running amok as everyone is left in awe of Alex's brutal assault, who created havoc with his massive hammer. His maniacal laughter along with his cold words still echoed in everyone's ears. Every time he crushed a beast, he would recite his epic verse, "Before the might of steel, your fate has already been sealed," and then boom, boom, bang. Trash. After a few explosions, a crater would form and within it would lie a flattened monster. By the end, Count Hamilton already had a headache as the bodies of higher-ranked monsters were quite precious and can be used to make various things like leather can be used to make armor while claws and fangs are used for weapons, but Alex destroyed all the precious materials. Horizontal ellipsis. After another meeting was held. No one slept a wink the entire night, but everyone seemed to be full of energy. The casualties in yesterday's battle were quite minor and numbered less than 10, unlike before when 30 to 40 died in each battle. As the discussion progressed, the rangers roaming around the forest having mastered many stealth skills gave the report. "It seems that the goblins have begun to wreak havoc. Instead of attacking us, they are attacking the small villages nearby." Alex's ears pricked up as he heard the goblins. "Uncle Hamilton, can you tell us which species pose a danger to us and who we should keep an eye on?" Count Hamilton nodded and said, "There are many tribes within the forest. But the most troublesome are the orcs and the men of the wolf tribe. Although they rarely appear and cause trouble, according to recent reports from the rangers, they are starting to make their move. Both of them had intelligence similar to humans and formed a huge tribe, so wiping them out is quite difficult." Thirdly are the goblins. Goblins are always roaming around the outskirts trying to chase after humans. Although their strength is low, they are numerous. Also, as you know, their reproductive capacity is greater than ours. And to top it off, they are attacking the smaller villages around. If this continues, this place will face a population crisis. After hearing Hamilton's explanation, Alex asked, "Why don't they enter the fort?" "It's an old stubborn belief. Each of them is a tribe headed by a chief. They don't want to reach the top. Fighting to the death is an honor for them, Hamilton." Alex's expression distorted and he said, "Idiots." Although Alex respected their courage and bravery, their ways were nothing more than the ways of fools. There are many villages where we have seen the goblins. They are first scouting with a squad and then attacking the villagers who are easy to attack. Hamilton listened attentively to the ranger's report, pondered over it, and asked the man to mark the location on the map. The man drew 9 locations and circled them in red where there was an imminent threat of goblin attack, and circled the one where goblins are seen in small numbers in yellow. Since goblins always attack in groups, each location requires at least a squad of 30 to 40 men. And 9 locations would mean 300 soldiers, and dividing the forces in such a short time is troublesome. As Count Hamilton tapped the armpit of the chair, Alex looked at the red dots and pondered. "Uncle, I think we should end this as soon as possible. If we don't do anything now, it will turn against us. Also, since the beast mainly attacks at noon or at night, we should deploy all our forces and get rid of them," Alex suggested. "Your Highness, I understand your concern, but the soldier has recently fought a battle and is now tired. Furthermore, if we push them now, they won't be able to fight properly at night," Count Hamilton said with a solemn expression. "Then let my soldiers handle it. Since we are only an additional force, our absence would not have a drastic effect. I will take 5 with me, Ben will take another squad, and Ian will take another. We can cover this area today, Alex said, pointing with his figure at a certain spot. Count Hamilton nodded and said, Roge, report the size and number along with all the details to His Highness. Also, prepare a squad of rangers to lead His Highness and the other squad. Ian, are you ready to take command? Yes, Father, Ian nodded with shining eyes. After some more discussion and information gathering, the squad formed up and gathered in front of the gates. Alex brought with him 5 soldiers who looked more like weapon bearers than fighters. Count Hamilton provided some safety tips and his experience. This is the warning sign. If you get into trouble, turn it on. It will explode in the sky with a red light like fireworks. Alex and his mini-squad followed the rangers and arrived at the destroyed village. Fortunately, to his relief, he didn't find any human corpses. The village was just a small tribe with less than 100 people living in the area, and they apparently evacuated the place. I noticed a slight movement, the ranger said. Alex nodded and continued on. As Alex lowered his back and squatted down, he moved slowly after taking cover behind the house and tilted his head to the side. He saw a group of goblins and 3 of them were wielding an old, rusty, broken sword. Cree! There was a creaking sound. Some mud fell off the walls of a dilapidated house and fell with a small thud as one of the soldiers leaned against the wall. The goblins looked around uncomfortably and raised their heads to see a group of people staring at them with an uncomfortable expression. The goblin fixed his gaze on Alex. His appearance was so atrocious that ordinary humans would either be stunned in fear or vomit upon seeing his disgusting appearance. He had a slimy, greenish body with a bare upper half and a pair of yellowish eyes. Alex smiled bitterly upon seeing his game of hide-and-seek being discovered so quickly. He. Hello, nice to meet you, Alex said and raised his hand to point. The goblin tilted his head trying to understand Alex's speech, but an arrow appeared before him and pierced his throat. Chapter 60, Bloody Goblins. Human, Huma, human. Kill, kill. The goblins roared at the sight of Alex and his men and shouted the battle cry as if they were going to party with humans. As Alex shouted, shoot. Alex ordered and leapt towards the goblin as the soldiers behind him began firing arrows while the rangers provided additional backup. As the arrows managed to kill 3 goblins, Alex took the reins and charged forward as he unsheathed the sword from his waist. Pulling out the sword, he slashed at the goblin holding the old rusty sword. The goblin followed Alex's idea and swung his sword at him. Metal clamp. A sound of metal clashing was heard and a piece of the sword flew through the air. In front of Alex, the rusty, pointed sword was cut off and Alex's sword went straight through the goblin's chest and decapitated its upper half with his strike. Blood splattered on his sword and face which irritated Alex a bit. Gross, Alex cursed, clicking his tongue and wiping his face. He jumped towards the other goblin and kicked him. A goblin jumped at Alex and dug his claws into him, who seemed to have let his guard down. However, the goblin's assumption soon proved to be wrong, and Alex twisted his body and avoided the incoming claws and kicked the goblin's torso lightly with enough force to make the goblin stumble and lose balance. With this, he swung his sword and killed the goblin's head. More goblins started surrounding Alex and seeing that his life was in danger, his soldiers were about to advance but Alex stopped them. One of the goblins jumped from behind, but Alex dodged the blow and hit the goblin with his elbow. The goblin spat blood and flew back with his jaw and teeth broken. Alex took the opportunity and brandished his sword as he ran towards the group of goblins, and approaching them he fiercely slashed his sword. Hiss, hiss, hiss. A light cracking sound was heard in the air as Alex's sword danced across the small war zone and cut a goblin into pieces. The last remaining goblin brandished his rusty sword in one hand and swung it towards Alex. Alex simply raised his sword to defend himself. Clamp. A loud screeching sound of metals rubbing against each other was heard. The goblin swung his sword all around trying to break through Alex's defense, but Alex didn't budge an inch in the face of the fierce attack. The goblin's sword was sharp and fast but he lacked control and eventually grew bored. Alex swung his sword, deflecting it and stabbing it straight into the goblin's heart. Thud. The goblin's body fell to the ground with a loud thud as Alex pulled his sword back. You have killed a mid-squire rank goblin. You have gained 100 experience points. Alex brushed aside the notification. These were the strongest ones and Alex faced them head-on so his gang could save some strength. He had 3 more locations to take care of today. Let's head to the next location, Alex shouted. Unlike the previous ones, the next location was stained with the blood of people. The ground was soaked in blood and the mud houses were destroyed. Many corpses lay on the ground and rotted in the open. Alex crouched down and took a pinch of blood. The blood had coagulated slightly but had not hardened yet, meaning that 3 to 4 hours had passed since the massacre occurred. Alex closed his eyes and clasped his hands together to offer a short prayer for the people dying there and wished for their souls to rest in that place in eternity. When Alex opened his eyes, he felt a piercing gaze filled with an eternal coldness that sent a chill down the observer's spine. "I'll go take a look. In the meantime, dig a grave and put them there. It's not good to leave corpses out in the open. It will attract the forest monsters." Alex found that there were 22 dead people at the scene and a trail of blood led outside. Alex searched for survivors with his mana sensor but there were none. Either these were the only people the goblin could have taken along with or the rest had already been evacuated. Alex followed the trail slowly with light steps so that the goblins would not be alerted to his presence and run away. With light steps, Alex leaned on the side of the tree as he tracked their presence and looked at them. There were 3 disciple-ranked goblins and they had their heads inside the corpse of a human and a monster beside them. Seeing the spectacle, Alex frowned at the sight of the monster's clamor as it held the ends of the bright red guts of the innocent victims who ate the flesh of the human and the beast who fell to the ground with their guts wide open. It was the ugliest thing Alex had ever seen in this life and the previous one. Although Alex felt sad seeing the scene, he did not feel pity for the humans. After all, it was the law of nature, survival of the fittest. And the actions of the goblins did not differ much from humans who hunt beasts and monsters for food. Alex's image blurred and a light cracking sound could be heard from the ground as Alex moved forward, leaving his footprints behind and brandished his sword to deliver a surprise attack to the disciple-ranked goblin. The disciple-ranked goblin sensed someone approaching and stood up from his spot and turned to defend himself, but it was too late to realize and Alex slashed and tore at the goblin, ripping it into pieces. The other goblins were shocked to see the sudden appearance of the enemy and jumped at him, but Alex kicked one of them and sent him flying into the tree and cut the other one down and killed it. The remaining goblin ran back trying to escape as he clearly felt that Alex was stronger than him. Alex was about to chase after him when he heard the crackling of fireworks, which made him frown. Chapter 61, What the hell? Alex looked at the snake-like fire that rose into the sky and exploded into reddish flames. Shit. I think Max is in trouble. Alex cursed and let the goblin escape and was about to run forward, but he stopped his steps and looked at the cookie and thought that the direction the signal came from was supposed to be Ian's zone. Alex's eyes widened as he thought about the matter. Ian is at the peak disciple level and is about to reach the master level. So the fact that Ian was facing trouble meant that someone stronger made their appearance. Wrapping things up, Alex ran in the direction of it along with his squad and the group of rangers as they communicated things and talked about the possible dangers Ian may have faced. At the northeast end of Alex's direction, the entire terrain had turned into a bloody battlefield. Team Ian suffered 2 casualties and multiple injuries. In front of him was a sea of goblins attacking them. There was a goblin hideout nearby and sensing the beings closer to them, the goblins began to rampage and attack Ian's team in large masses. The Ians and Rangers showed worse expressions of fear and shock, while many thought of retreating, but Ian was determined to handle them and get rid of them now. Because he was sure that if they left this goblin like this, there would be many casualties. The current village had been totally devastated and all 100 inhabitants had died. And if these goblins reached the most densely populated village of around 500 inhabitants, unimaginable things might have happened. Ian led the flank while shouting, "Hold the formation. We have to hold until reinforcements arrive." Ian unsheathed his sword and charged into the sea of goblins. He kicked a goblin in front, who flew out and crashed into the other goblins, causing the front of the goblin swarm to crumble. Taking this opportunity, he ordered his man to fire. The arrows pierced the goblin and those in front were killed, but those in the back had no mercy even for their kin and used the corpse of the goblin in front as meat shields to protect themselves from the arrows. Ian leaped in along with him. The rangers also leaped over the sea of goblins and cut down every green head that came into their sight. While they were busy playing, they didn't notice the presence of a goblin wearing a cloak and carrying a staff that seemed to be made of bones. Hudra Furious, he chanted something in the goblin language and a huge fireball materialized in the air out of nowhere and fell upon Ian and the scouts. Ian's hair stood on end as he sensed danger and a burning sensation above his head, and he looked at a sphere of fire falling upon them. Ian's eyeball narrowed and he stomped on the ground. He jumped up and pulled his sword back to his left shoulder and covering it with a thin layer of mana, he slashed towards it. Bomb! Following his strike, like waves crashing on the shore, an invisible ripple formed in the air, followed by the air before Ian was torn apart and cut apart along with the fireball descending upon them. The fireball split into two halves and each half separated and went in two opposite directions. One fell upon the sea of goblins and burned the goblin, who let out a sharp cry of pain and anguish. And another fell near his village. Ian noticed the trajectory of the other fireball and rushed to save them, but Alex and Max appeared in time and both powerful slashes neutralized and completely extinguished the flames in the air. Ian breathed a sigh of relief but did not calm down, as due to his careless mistakes, his people could have suffered many injuries. Alex's expression turned solemn as he saw the dark-cloaked goblin holding a staff. If there had not been such a large number of goblins, he would have screamed. What the hell? A goblin mage? Are you kidding me? Even after countless searches, Alex had not found anyone with a talent for magic. Although one can also be a mage despite talent, for that one needs a lot of teaching and guidance, and there are no mage towers or any mage school in Nevin. Furthermore, for Alex to teach magic to others, he needs to awaken his mana and use magic first. Alex asked the others to take care of those green heads while he and Ian took care of the mage. A mage can be highly lethal if given the chance to cast spells from a long distance. Alex stomped on the ground and jumped on top of the goblin, and every time he landed, he would do so with a loud rumble that sent the goblins flying, and then he would jump again. After a few jumps and crushing everything in his path, Alex finally arrived in front of the goblin. Alex noticed a small smile appear on the goblin's lips and his senses sharpened a bit. As he landed, he noticed a change in the structure of the ground and it wobbled, and Alex fell into the huge pit that the goblin wizard had created. The goblin waved his staff and many fireballs appeared in the sky and began to descend upon Alex. Alex saw the illuminating glow, but there was no look of fear in his eyes. Clenching his fist, he looked at the wall of dirt and dust in front of him and clenched his fist tightly. His muscles bulged and veins started to appear on his arm, and contracting his muscles to the max, he punched the wall in front of him. Boom! With a loud thunderous sound, the wall in front of him collapsed, and a fissure started to form in front of Alex, and the space in front of Alex was cleared. Alex wasted no time and jumped out of the pit. The fireball landed on the spot where he was standing and small explosions started to occur. Alex jumped out of the spot and looked at the goblin mage with a big smile on his face and was about to punch him when something with a superior speed hit the goblin mage's head and crushed his head, which exploded like a watermelon. What the fuck? Alex shouted, seeing the scene. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62, How to Deal with a Frenzied Orc. Alex, who is rushing to kill the goblin mage, soon flinched and took a few steps back in panic after seeing something hit the goblin mage and weakened it. Alex stepped back and saw that a wooden mace had hit the goblin mage. While Alex was wondering where the hell the thing had come from, he heard a loud roar that shook the entire forest. The bloodthirsty voice of the roar echoed throughout the forest, and all the fighting going on in the surroundings suddenly stopped, as if no one present was fighting. The ground began to rumble and a huge greenish body roaring at the top of its lungs leapt out from the forest. The figure landed on the ground of pitiful goblins and crushed them into meat paste, followed by loud rumblings from the ground. Alex looked at the scene with eyes filled with terror. It was a huge orc, but something didn't add up with it. It had a massive body that was 3.5 to 4 meters long and two large canines protruding from its lower jaw, and each of its arms was as thick as a log. Veins bulged all over its body, and its eyes had become bloodshot, and its body was emanating mana fiercely. Your Highness, it is similar to the monster that was lost, Ian shouted. Alex realized that the orc's mana was running frantically. It was in a state of mana rampage and could not control its mana flow. All of you will retreat and stay away from here. Anyone below the maximum squire rank return first and report to the count. Send up the flare, Alex ordered. The orc beat his chest, making a thunderous sound, and ran across the field. Dum, dum, dum. With every step he took, the ground rumbled and cracked. The goblins ran away in fear, but were swept away by the orc's momentum, and some unfortunate ones were hit due to the ground cracking and being left under their feet, turning into meat paste. Some of the goblins tried to fight back, but were knocked into the air with a casual blow from the orc. The orc looked like an apostle of destruction and a herald of death that rampaged and killed everything it came across. Alex looked at the orc, who looked like a bald monster with two huge protruding fangs. Alex didn't rush to attack and waited for the goblins to exhaust the orc. Currently, the orc was doing its job of killing the goblin, and he just had to wait for the opportunity and steal the kill. Alex raised his hand and made a signal to shoot the arrows at the orc. At the rear, the people who had retreated to a safe distance took out the crossbows and, aiming at orc, fired the arrows. The arrows rained down on the orcs, but most of them couldn't pierce the orc's defenses and most of them bounced off. The orc's skin was quite tough and the wooden-tipped arrows couldn't pierce it. Alex shouted at them to use the steel arrows. One of the men took out an arrow that had a sharp steel metal tip and loaded it into the crossbow. And taking the ground after adjusting his position and aiming at the huge orc, he shot at it. On the other hand, the orc fought and killed the goblins. A huge hobgoblin that was much larger than the normal goblin and looked like a mini orc rushed forward and jumped on the orc with a huge wooden mace. The orc roared, caught the mace with one hand and pulled the goblin towards him. The goblin tried to run away, but a pair of huge hands grabbed his head tightly and ripped it off his body and threw it away. He took the mace in his hand and was about to take a step when many arrows rained down on him again, but this time some of them pierced through him. He was forced to take a step back. One arrow stuck in his arm where many others had stuck in his thigh. The orc pulled out the arrow and a greenish liquid gushed out from his wounds. Previously this arrow shot at him only caused a small tickle, but now they were able to pierce his defense and burrow deep inside his skin. He screamed and moaned in a pained tone and looked at the place from where the arrows rained down on him. He let out a thunderous and bloody roar and grabbed the goblin and lifted him into the air, and using his thick log-like arm as a catapult he threw him into the group of men. Alex realized the orc's intention and shouted, "Take cover." A body flew through the air and shot towards the group of men like a cannon. The group of soldiers and rangers jumped in fright. A mangled body crashed to the ground, and with the remaining momentum it rolled on the ground and then slid against the ground while breaking trees and rocks in its path. Some of the men who were closest to the impact were thrown, but thankfully, no one was hurt. The orc chuckled and held another corpse in his massive hand and was about to throw it when two silhouettes appeared before him. One slashed with his sword and gave it a huge cut while the other jumped in the air and kicked it. The orc raised his head to defend himself. But Alex changed the trajectory in the middle and slid to the ground and slashed with his sword at the orc's legs while he turned his body in the air and kicked a huge thick log as if it were an arm. Bang! With a loud bang, the orc was pushed back a few steps and slid off the ground. "Gr!" He roared again with his bloodthirsty cry and rushed towards the duo, but due to the cut, he staggered and tripped over the meat-paced goblin and fell. Chapter 63, Fighting a Frenzied Orc 2. Ian raised his sword and was about to rush in for a final blow, but Alex's senses screamed danger and forbade him from moving forward. And just as Alex had guessed, some goblins lying in the surroundings tried to seize the opportunity and charge towards the orc warrior, but before they could reach him, the orc stood up and swung the wooden mace he had obtained from the goblin around him. Bang! 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 Bone-crunching sounds could be heard as the goblins were struck by the mage and were thrown straight back by the force of the blow. The orc stood up and his body began to glow an orange hue. The orc had arms thicker than trunks and had many holes that were created after the arrow was lodged in his body. The orc's body began to heat up and smoke began to come out and the wounds disappeared, and even the huge bloody cut on his legs that kept him off balance disappeared without leaving a single scratch. "What the hell?" Ian shouted with an expression of shock and disbelief as he looked at the miracle that happened before his eyes. While orcs had a good regeneration ability, that didn't mean the wound would heal so quickly. "Can we defeat that thing? Isn't that something impossible with that much regeneration?" Ian asked with a trembling voice. The mana coursing through its body had amplified everything: its hunger, its anger, its strength, and even its regeneration ability. The only fortunate thing is that the orc has lost its self-awareness and is like a raging bull that attacks everything. We just need to carefully avoid blows and we'll be able to defeat it. No matter how powerful one's regeneration is, it can't regrow its severed limbs, Alex explained. Hearing Alex's words, Ian finally calmed down a bit. The orc's green eyeball turned bloodshot in anger as he glared at the two small, graceful humans standing in front of him who were trying to block his way. He beat his chest muscles like a drum, as if he was giving them a warning to run with their asses. The orc pulled out the giant mace he got after crushing the goblins and shooting a murderous glare at the human. He let out a thunderous roar. Holding the mace tightly, he charges at Alex with thunderous steps. The ground rumbled and an imprint of his massive foot was left on the ground along with slight cracks and soon appeared above Alex and Ian. When he came within striking range, he swung his mace at Alex in a downward arc. Alex ran towards the swing's arc and using his momentum, he rolled under the swing and felt a strong gust of wind brush his face as the displaced air passed by him and the mace missed Alex by a hair's breadth. Ian's entire body shuddered as he saw how close the mace swung away from Alex's body, and Alex narrowly avoided the blow, but it by no means seemed like a coincidence. Rather, Alex looked like a warrior who had gone through countless battles to hone his instincts. Alex jumped up and moved slightly away from Orc as he raised his sword. The Orc turned his body towards Alex and completely ignored Ian and even forgot about his existence. The Orc jumped at Alex and swung his mace. Boom! The mace fell to the ground with a thunderous crash and formed a small pit, but Alex dodged the blow and seeing the opening, he landed a clean cut under the Orc's arms. Alex could hear the groan of pain escaping the Orc's lips, which made him go even madder with rage, and the Orc seemed to have lost all his rationality. As he lunged at Alex, the latter held his sword in a horizontal grip and lowered his shoulder, loosening his grip a little. The Orc swung his mace at Alex again, but Alex timed his move perfectly and fell to the ground, letting the mace pass over his head, and swinging his sword, the Orc swung at an angle and slashed it across Orc's hands, which cut through Orc's empty hand, and the sword followed Alex's movement and cleanly cut through the fingers. Alex took the opportunity and swung his sword again, but the Orc was able to react in time and block his blow. Alex felt as if he had crashed into a huge iron wall and received a strong rebound that hit him hard from within, and with his hands numb he staggered in his steps and was forced to take a few steps back as he slid off the ground. But Alex didn't back away but instead lunged at the Orc. Since the Orc had a huge body, it wasn't difficult for Alex to get a foothold on the giant Orc. His feet landed on the Orc's thick, trunk-sized wrist, and using it as a fulcrum, he jumped again, and in midair, he spun his body around. Alex deftly lunged and slashed with his sword, which scraped the giant Orc's shoulder, and a huge, deep cut appeared on the Orc. Blood poured out of the open wound in a sickening gurgle like a fountain as Alex pulled out muscle after cutting the neck muscle, and the tip of his sword was just inches away from the Orc's neck bone. But before Alex could sink his sword deep into the neck, the Orc swung his hand trying to strike Alex. The Orc's strength was enough to tear any human apart, so Alex took no chances, and stomping on the Orc's shoulders, he launched himself into the distance. Crack! A cracking sound was heard and the Orc's shoulder dislocated. A soft sigh of pain escaped the Orc's lips. Alex noticed that the wound on the Orc's neck began to fade away, but unlike before, a scar appeared on his neck. Also, Alex's predictions were accurate as the goblin's severed fingers did not grow back. Chapter 64, Ending Things. Alex looked across at the Orc and his lips curved upwards, and a slight smile appeared on his face. "It seems your preparation is over." Alex noticed something coming running towards him and instinctively jumped to the side and dodged the blow. A massive mace struck behind him as the Orc roared and threw the mace, and then picked up the fallen goblins and rocks and began throwing them at Alex. The Orc searched the ground and threw everything he could get his hands on at Alex. Alex spun on the ground as he saw the Orc picking up the things and throwing them at him. The fussy, hateful human had completely angered him by avoiding all of his attacks. The frenzied Orc jumped at the last desperate attempt and roared in anger, slamming his fist into the ground. Boom! A loud crack was heard and a fissure formed, extending towards Alex, but before he could reach him, he leapt into the air and appeared near Orc. He slashed his sword, but the Orc opened his clenched fist and held the sword. Greenish blood flowed from his clenched fist as he held the fragmented sword and pulled it towards him, lifting Alex into the air. "Oops," Alex muttered, but there was no sign of fear or panic in his eyes. The Orc raised his other empty fist and wanted to smash Alex into meat paste, but he was confused when he heard Alex's sudden shout. "Do it, Ian." As soon as Alex's words fell, a blinding, sharp light flashed behind the Orc and Ian appeared with his sword shining brightly. "Idiot, you're going to pay with your life for underestimating and neglecting me," Ian shouted and slashed with his sword. While Alex was busy toying with the Orc, Ian used the technique taught by his father and poured all of his mana into his sword and covered it with layer upon layer of mana, making his sword sharper and fiercer than ever. Alex kicked the Orc's wrist, who was in shock for a moment, and released his sword from his grip and swung his body upwards. He reached for the Orc's head and slashed at it with all his might. Following Ian and Alex's slashes, an intense grayish light flickered and passed over the Orc's neck, and a huge gale spread across the ground like a shockwave and everything fell silent. Both Alex and Ian, and after slashing, landed on the ground, followed by the orc's huge head that still had a fierce expression with its eyes wide open, slides off the body and falls to the ground with a small thud, and followed by this, the orc's huge and heavy body falls to the ground with a large thud. You have defeated a half-step master rank orc. You gained 150 experience points, less because he didn't defeat it on his own. Ian panted heavily and fell to the ground. He had used up all of his mana and was now quite weak. After defeating the orc, Alec looked around and noticed that Ben and his squads hadn't arrived until now. Are they in trouble or did the orcs attack it? Alex muttered as he thought about the possibility. Ian, I think we need to go back quickly. We don't know if we'll encounter another monster like it, Alex said as he examined the massive 3-meter corpse of the orc and crouched down to examine it. Alex frowned as he noticed some strange marks on its body, and as he looked there were piercing marks as if something had stung it, and to his surprise the marks hadn't disappeared. Max, take the orc's corpse to the fortress, Alex said, and took some rangers and decided to inspect the area. A horde of goblins broke through the forest and ran in a disorderly manner as they saw a mud wall in front of them. They licked their lips and ran around with lascivious glances and tongues, spilling drops of saliva that fell to the ground. As soon as the squad of goblins emerged from the forest, they found the village, much to their luck. They were about to enter the outer periphery of the village when one of the running goblins suddenly stepped back and fell backwards with his body throbbing and made a twisting sound. The other goblin stopped his steps when an arrow pierced his head. After this, many arrows rained down on them as if a storm of arrows was pelting them. Charge, Alex shouted with a dry mouth, thirsty for liquid. His order echoed throughout the place, and following it, the company of people ran towards the goblin holding the sword and a shield. Explosion! 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 Loud sounds of metal clashing began to be heard, along with a shrill scream and a shriek that shook the entire place. Alex saw a huge goblin coming out of the forest and running towards him. Alex stomped the ground and, channeling the strength into his legs, he propelled his body forward, which shot out like a cannon towards the goblins. The goblin didn't set his eyes on Alex as he didn't feel any threat from him and just gave a simple punch to crush the human, but his mistake of underestimating the enemy cost him quite dearly, which he would never forget in his life, unfortunately, only if he stayed alive. Following his movement, a huge hand flew past him and blood splattered and a small thud was heard. The goblin stopped in his tracks and turned his back to see his arm fly back and fall to the ground. And before he could scream in horror, a bright light flickered and his vision blinded him. Alex shook off his sword, which was covered in blood, and walked back towards the village, where 40 people were hiding in a few huts. We got rid of them. Please follow us back. The situation is pretty dire right now. You can come back when things get clearer, Alex said as he narrowed his eyes at the group of people who finally agreed after much debate. Alex sighed in relief that finally, after 6 damn hours, he was able to return. Chapter 65, Examining the Orc. Alex, after returning from cleaning up the goblins, stripped off his blood and sweat-filled clothes and took a nice warm bath to get rid of the blood and stench. After taking a hot bath, he sat down on the chair in the room he had been assigned and rubbed his chin. He felt quite tired. He had tried his best today, but his exhaustion was merely physical, while inside he felt quite fresh and alive. With his robust soul that had been nurtured by generations of torture and going through special treatment by the hand of the goddess, it would be strange if he became mentally tired. His muscles had cramped from staying in the capital without any good fights that could boost his adrenaline. Alex thought that after being bullied by the goddess of war every day for years, the fight was etched into his consciousness, and on the days he hadn't fought, he felt quite out of place, making him wonder if he had become a psychopath. Alex looked around the room and sighed as he felt quite lonely without the presence of Ridaya, who would always stay by his side with her charming shining eyes and always take care of him. Every time he sat like this, Ridaya would magically appear out of nowhere behind him and whisper some sweet and nice words and start massaging his shoulder, which gave Alex a heavenly feeling that melted his heart. Hey, Ridaya, do you also think about me in your free time? I don't know what my other wives are up to, but I'd be lucky not to be cursed for all my insolence, Alex chuckled. Alex stood up, stretched his neck, and thought about today's battle. The orc's appearance out of nowhere was quite unusual, and Alex had a bad feeling about it. System, what do you think of the orc? Alex asked with a solemn expression. Host, I don't know anything about it. If you're asking me to analyze the orc, then I can ask for your forgiveness. I can't do that kind of thing. All I can do is release your strength little by little, Alex no longer spoke further nor belittled the system. If it had been any other time, the two of them would have already engaged in a Deo of Curses preaching contest, but now Alex was in no mood to joke about such things. "Let's examine the specimen first," Alex muttered and stood up with a solemn expression. Horizontal ellipsis. Within a huge and spacious room that previously seemed to have been used as a storage room, it was now empty. The place was the basement and was used for miscellaneous works. In the middle was a huge corpse with a pool of blood, a trail of blood that after flowing for hours seemed to coagulate and form a small pool solidifying. Alex, followed by Hamilton, walked towards the huge corpse of the orc. As Alex approached, a faint and disgusting smell assaulted his nostrils and almost made him vomit. As the corpse had been left for hours, it began to rot, giving off a pungent rotting smell that could make one stop eating for days. Alex's nose twitched a little, but he didn't care much about it, and squatting down, he began to slide his finger over the slimy bodies of the orcs. After examining the body, a grimace appeared on Alex's face and his eyes began to burn with anger. Hamilton noticed the change in Alex's expression, but he didn't rush to ask what Alex had discovered and waited for Alex to finish the examination. Alex stood up and said, "Uncle Hamilton, did you understand the details of our fight with Orc?" Hamilton listened to Alex's words and nodded. "As you know, his wounds would heal quickly as soon as they appeared in the berserk state, but if you look closely, there are signs of some minor and subtle injuries on his body. And I don't think they are scars from the lingering wound he received in our battle, or any other. It must have been before he went berserk." Hamilton's eyebrows furrowed as he couldn't understand Alex's words and asked, "Your Highness, since orcs belong to warrior tribes, isn't it natural to have scars? And as far as I know, brave orc warriors take scars from wars as a symbol of their bravery and valor." "You're right about that," Alex said as he nodded briefly and pointed at Orc's hands, adding, "But look at that scar. Do you think one can get it in battle?" Hamilton frowned and stared at the spot Alex pointed at. He leaned his body towards the orc's hand to get closer and take a better look, and as soon as he saw the scars, his eyeball widened in shock and disbelief. On the wrists of the hands, there were round and deep scars that one normally finds on prisoners when they're handcuffed tightly, and the scars on the orc were very similar to those. Hamilton's body shook for a moment and he looked at Alex with a solemn expression and asked, "Your Highness, what do you think about it?" Alex also leaned down, touched the wound, and said, "The first thing I see is that the scars seem to be quite fresh. No, if we think about how he got this, maybe he committed a sin and was imprisoned by the orc tribe, or..." Alex's breathing quickened as he was about to explain the second thing. "Maybe this orc has escaped from an experiment facility, and this explanation is quite plausible, and there's a high chance that it's true," Alex explained. Hamilton's face distorted and he looked at the orc with a solemn expression. If Alex's guess was correct, and there was an experiment going on somewhere inside the forest in a secret hideout, the situation is more troublesome than he expected. A single frenzied orc can crush a quarter of his army, and if there were around a dozen of them, only God knows what kind of disaster would befall them. "Uncle Hamilton, I need your help to check a few things," Alex said. Chapter 66, It's time for the second round. Count Hamilton nodded and asked, "What do you need me to do?" "I want you to channel your mana into the orc and examine the orc's mana core," Alex said and explained the process a bit to Count Hamilton. "Why do you need to go through all this trouble? Can't we just take out the orc's mana core since it's dead?" Hamilton asked. "No, I want to check the channels first and see if there's anything strange in them. So please inject your mana into them," Alex said. Hamilton nodded and raised his finger and mana began to condense on his finger. He placed it on the orc's body and tried to circulate the mana inside the orc. The orc's body gave off a faint light as the mana ran through its mana channels and sucked into its body. Hamilton frowned as he felt that the orc's mana channels weren't right and seemed to be quite different from the others. He knew that the mana channels of monsters and humans were bound to be different, but they still bore some resemblance to humans. Furthermore, orcs mostly do not awaken mana, and only those who are highly talented among them can awaken it, but this orc body structure was rather strange. Hamilton felt an ominous sensation flowing within the orc, and as soon as he reached the core, he felt a jolt of burning and quickly withdrew his hand. Hamilton's back was totally drenched in sweat, and he stared at the orc with eyes of disbelief and shock. "Uncle, what's wrong?" Alex asked with a solemn expression. Hamilton wiped away his sweat and said, "It's dark. The entire core has turned dark, and I've never seen such a sinister mana core. It seemed as if it had been contaminated by something that caused the orc to lose control. Alex clearly heard every word of Count Hamilton and carefully noted them down in his memories as he tried to analyze the situation. I think my guess is right. Something troublesome is going on inside the forest, Alex muttered as he rubbed his chin. Hearing Alex's words, Hamilton nodded. They need to do something before the situation gets worse, and for that they need to go deep into the forest that is full of dangers and risks. After all, the forest was an unexplored area for them. As Alex and Hamilton spoke, the sound of the trumpet rang out again, indicating that another beast tide was upon them again. Alex and Ian's battle records were narrated to every soldier and recruit, and upon hearing them, their eyes were filled with wonder and reverence. Hearing the stories of a fight between the huge orc and His Highness, they wanted to contribute as much as they could in the battles. But they needed to wait, but they didn't have to wait too long because the opportunity was before them as the huge beast tide was heading this way, which was much larger than before compared to the previous ones. Alex took command first as Ben had fought too much today and received some injuries. Still, Ben wanted to fight and take orders first, but Alex asked him to oversee the situation from above and only make a move if the situation worsened. On the ground, Alex and Charles took charge of the respective battalions while Ian watched Charles as he waited for the second turn to take command, while Hamilton stood atop the city wall and looked at the massive amount of monsters and beasts rampaging here. Hamilton was called the Guardian of the West, as under him there had not been a single outbreak in the past 25 years. It was a pity that he could not break through in epic and remained stagnant. Hamilton can be considered a genius in Nevin, but in kindly he could hardly be called average. Seeing no prospects for him, it was obvious that the academies would not support him. Armed with the knowledge of various good tactics and trained in a good academy in Kinley, he was quite superior compared to others in their ranks. When Alex thinks about this matter, he considers himself quite lucky that he didn't go to the academy, because he knew that, like in a novel, his study at the academy would be filled with slaps and brothers fighting each other. Compared to that, Alex was a free man and could do whatever he wanted. Alex looked at the horde and shouted, "Ready your shields, raise your spears, and sharpen your swords. It's time to crush these bastards who dare to set their eyes on us. It's time for them to face a wrath. Unleash the beast within you. Now go forth, but don't fight like a fool just to get your asses beat. It's time for round 2. Yes, in the eyes of others it looked like they were going to party, but instead of a party filled with food and wine, they were going to drink the blood of beasts. The soldier screamed upon hearing Alex's words and released all his strength and charged towards the beast. Alex took out his weapon of mass destruction and put it on his shoulder. If the monster and beast coming towards him knew of the previous experience of the horde of beasts being turned into meat paste by this weapon of mass destruction, half of them would already think of fleeing the place. Still, it wouldn't be too late for them to flee after witnessing the myth of the meat grinder, whose fame would soon spread far and wide. Rushing forward, Alex made a huge and powerful leap and his body soared high into the sky. Appearing above the monster's head, Alex twisted his body in the air and his figure shot like a meteor towards the ground. Accompanied by the momentum of his fall, he raised the huge hammer and took advantage of the momentum of his fall and slashed with his hammer. Boom! A loud explosion reverberated throughout the area and the ground and trees around the impact were crushed into pieces and we were sent flying like dust. The monster's fate was much worse compared to the trees and ground, and those who hadn't awakened were directly crushed while the one with the rank of squire was immediately killed and turned into blood mist. Chapter 67, with a sword in his hand, he danced above the sea of blood and corpses. After sweeping the battlefield with his massive hammer, Alex placed it to the side. Most of the meaningless blows had been taken care of by the bloody battle, and Alex noticed that many goblins were swarming around the fortress. They had gathered a small army of their own, and it seemed like they wanted to use this opportunity to take them down. But whether they managed to take them down, only time will tell. Alex used his mana sensor and noticed that there were several strong hobgoblins on the ground charging at him, and these hobgoblins were at the front of the battle. Rotate the shift quickly. All of you are exhausted, while these goblins are full of strength. Plus, they are more agile than humans. I will hold the line along with the troop sergeants, Alex ordered. Under his command, the soldiers began to retreat while another squad began to take their place. Above the walls, archers began to fire arrows at the approaching goblins. His arrows killed many goblins, but it wasn't enough to make much of a difference against these mad goblins. Alex jumped up from the pile of corpses he had killed and pulled out his sword as he stepped out from the pile of a blood-covered corpse. His sword glistened under the dim moonlight that would soon disperse with the arrival of dawn. Alex took a step forward with his right, and with a single swing of his sword, a massive goblin hand flew into the air and struck the other goblins standing behind, and blood splattered on their faces, making their vision blind for a moment. The goblin tried to grab Alex with his remaining hand, wanting to throw him down, but Alex walked past him and slashed his neck with his sword, and stabbed his sword into his throat. The goblin's massive body, which was around 8 feet tall, fell to the ground. Alex leapt over it and used the goblin's chest as a fulcrum to leap over the goblin behind him. Arriving before the goblins, Alex leaned his body forward, shifting his center of weight forward as he placed his sword on his left waist. He drew his sword with great speed. The blow was quite fast and strong, though it had been perfectly timed and calculated. Alex's sword flew fast and cut too deep into the goblin's gut. His sword passed past its gut, giving it a deep and grievous wound. His sword struck fast, and with the cut, he killed many goblins that were in the arc of the draw in one go. Impressive. Excellent, Count Hamilton muttered as he watched Alex's impressive display of swordsmanship. Alex's swords danced as his own pierced the goblin's armpit, and he pulled it back and slashed its exposed throat. The goblin threw his hands over the wound to cover it as lifeblood gushed out. Alex's display of swordsmanship had not a shred of mana, and the style itself was beautiful and terrifying at once. Alex showed off his skills as he blocked the massive axe that had been thrown at his exposed back, but just as he raised his sword back to his back, the weapon slipped off the sword with a clang and hit the ground. At that moment the turn had fully rotated, and all the new soldiers arrived on the battlefield and fired their arrows at the goblin mass. Some of them took up their swords and shields and charged down the slope near the enemy. The goblins diverted their forces as some charged at his soldiers, while others ran towards Alex with a deep bloodlust. Alex watched as many of the goblins decided to fight him. Alex's lips curved upwards with a small smile as he saw the massive goblins flocking around him. "You goblins are morons," Alex muttered under his breath as he watched their approach. He supposed that facing so many enemies at once was a good thing, as it would force him to do his best, but only if he managed to stay alive at the end of the battle. Alex pulled back his sword as he bent his knees and channeled his strength into his legs, his figure disappearing for a moment as he thrust his sword towards the approaching goblins. The goblin at the front of the charge suddenly felt déjà vu, and before he could understand what happened, a large, bloody hole opened up in his chest, and even the goblin behind him was also hit by it. The same holes even appeared on his chest as a blast of pressure passed by his chest. Ian protected his troops as he launched a massive arc of burning swords towards the goblin, burning them. Ian looked at Alex's directions and saw his beautiful movements as he danced in the sea of blood and corpses. Two massive goblins brandishing their maces charged towards Alex, who instead of backing away, leapt towards them. The two goblins swung their maces at him, and Alex twisted his body in the air, bending it at an unpredictable angle, showing off his superior flexibility, and dodged the blow quite skillfully, much to the amazement of Ian and his troop. But he wasn't done. After dodging the blow, he jumped again as his feet touched the ground and twisted his body in a complex 360 degrees arc as he slashed his sword across the goblin's back and cut open both of their backs. Another goblin ran towards Ald and slammed his mace into Alex's back when he found an opening. But Alex didn't need to look back, and as if he had eyes in his back, he simply stepped aside as he bent his upper body and twisted his body towards the attack as he twisted his wrist and slashed. His sword slipped off the outer edge of the goblin's mace, and sparks flew as both metals collided with each other and slid off. The directions of the goblin's mace changed by a margin, and it missed Alex by a hair, while Alex's sword slashed open the goblin's stomach, causing blood to gush out of the stomach like a waterfall. "Impressive, Your Highness." Everyone who saw the scene was stunned for a moment and couldn't help but be mesmerized by the beautiful and swift and decisive swordsmanship that Alex displayed in this battle. Everyone couldn't help but praise Alex, and they all felt a burning sensation in their hearts that made them want to follow Alex's example and crush the enemies and learn some of his moves while watching him. Count Hamilton watched Alex's swordsmanship and thought that it was one of the best sword styles he had ever seen, if not the best. And the way Alex dodged the blow made him look like a veteran on the battlefield who had fought in countless battles but still survived fighting on a harsh battlefield. A true warrior who, with a sword in his hand, danced above the sea of blood and corpses. Drink. Chapter 68. Ian gulped as he watched Alex fight. Although Alex's swordsmanship and fighting were quite good and his style was quite fierce, Ian was afraid that mishaps would happen to Alex due to his nature of rushing into the battlefield alone. Ian waved his hands and beckoned to the man beside him and said, "I'm going to give you a task that you'll have to do no matter how worse the situation may become." "Yes, Commander," The soldiers beside him saluted Ian in armor with respect and looked at him with an expectant gaze. Form an elite squad and follow His Majesty and try to keep him safe. I don't want anything bad to happen to him due to carelessness. Ian waved his hand, signaling the man to move quickly. But he frowned as he saw no one moving forward and looked back to see the soldiers standing there like a statue, with a frozen look all over their face. What? Why aren't you following my orders, Ian? Ian said as he cleaved a beast charging at him in two. Commander, are you sure about that? One of the men spoke up and turned his head towards Alex and upon seeing him added, by the way, I'm seeing things. I don't think His Majesty needed our protection. Everyone behind him nodded as they listened to his words. After all, if one sees Alex from a distance, he looks more like a beast than these green-headed goblins, and it seemed like these goblins needed Alex's protection, not the other way around. In fact, many began to feel pity for the goblins charging at Alex. Seeing Alex's brutal fight with the goblins, who were splitting his head wide open, one might even begin to feel pity for the goblin and ask Alex to show mercy to this poor goblin. Ian looked at his troops and said, I know, but he's fighting alone with no one around. Although he's not careless, we should take precautions beforehand. Then get your ass over there and stop wasting time, Ian shouted. The soldier nodded in unison and started running towards Alex while Ian looked at the scene and muttered. Are you sure he didn't have those barbaric features? Ian shuddered at the sight of Alex drenched in blood as he directly struck the goblin's vital points. Alex went totally mad and his body was covered in blood from head to toe. If one looks at Alex, they might panic at the sight of his state and be confused into thinking that it's Alex's blood and that he's severely injured. Come on, give me your blood. Yes, excellent. Give me your life. Your death will be my nourishment, Alex shouted like a madman as he brandished his swords everywhere. Host, calm down a bit. Don't get lost in the endless slaughter and killing. The system began to fear that Alex might lose control and that the monster that had been dormant within him might awaken at any moment. Just thinking about Alex achieving this kind of strength without awakening can scare many to death, and some even get angry thinking that if Alex can almost take a master rank when he hadn't awakened his mana, what would happen when he did awaken his mana? The system knew everything about Alex and was sure of one thing: the day Alex awakens mana, this world will surely suffer a catastrophe. Alex himself was a walking disaster, a nuclear bomb in himself that could explode at any moment if provoked slightly. This was one of the many reasons why Alex's abilities had previously been sealed and he was allowed to slowly recover them. With the awakening of mana, many skills that had been dormant in Alex's arsenal will be unlocked, and each of the skills were taught by the goddess herself, who were the epitome of perfection. In fact, by the end of Alex's training, Alex can use some of those skills more proficiently than the goddess, and his control in magic has come to be on par with that of the goddess. All in all, Alex had become a dangerous being who, if left alone and without guidance, can destroy the world if he goes berserk. And one of the system's tasks was to keep Alex under control. Don't worry. I'm fine, I haven't lost my mind. Do you think I'll get lost playing with these babies? Alex said as the system replied. I'm just bullying them, host. It's still best to be cautious though. You're getting more and more careless. So please be careful so that you don't waste your worthless life. Alex's lips twitched uncontrollably as he heard the system describe his life as worthless. You are worthless, your family is worthless. No, your entire 14 generations are worthless, Alex shouted. Host, I am sorry to remind you that this system had no parents or family. Therefore, I apologize for that. A thick vein bulged on Alex's forehead as he heard the system's voice ring out in his mind, but he quickly ignored it and asked the system to display his status window as he heard another level-up notification. Alex looked at his stats. Name, Alex von Stan Species, human rank, none level. 38 EXP. 0/1850 English, horsepower. 79/86 mana. 0 strength. 44 agility. 44 stamina, 41 vitality, 43 magic, 0 stat points, 28 active skills, Eyes of Truth, unlocked, Mana Sensor, unlocked, Emperor's Charisma, locked, Emperor's Pressure, locked, Goddess Fortune's Blessing, locked, Healing, locked, Restoration, locked, Goddess Enhancement, locked, Passive Skills, Piercing Thrust LV0, Heavy Iron Swordsmanship LV0, Abyssal/LV0, Great Martial Arts LV0, Powerful Punch LV0, Spell, locked, 5 Elements Breathing Technique LV. He noticed that the magic stat was listed with a faint line, which meant that it wouldn't be long until his mana awakened. Alex was looking at his stats and was thinking about where to place them when his mana sensor detected a slight movement. Alex activated the mana sensor and increased his radius tendency as soon as he received the signals, his expression turning ugly. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69, Consequences. Shouldn't you worry about yourself first? Alex's expression turned rather grim as he shouted at the top of his lungs. Go back, everyone return to the fortress. Form the shield formation, Alex roared at the top of his lungs. Hearing Alex's orders, everyone wondered what could have happened to make the king behave in such a frenzied manner. Furthermore, it was the first time they had seen such an uneasy expression on his face. Everyone decided to take a step back. The remaining beasts, monsters, and goblins fighting in the surroundings suddenly sensed danger and began to retreat, which surprised everyone except Alex, who ran towards the formation. Atop the fortress, Hamilton's expression distorted as he finally felt a sharp sense of threat. Other than Alex, only Hamilton was able to notice the changes that were occurring within the forest. Charles, take command. I'm going down, Count Hamilton ordered and leapt over the fortress walls. Hamilton jumped up and walked forward and stood beside Alex as all the soldiers raised their shields, forming a massive shield line. Although they didn't know what was going on or what danger was coming for them, seeing the intense reactions of both Hamilton and Alex, they raised a guard and stood alert. Suddenly the entire area fell silent, but everyone could sense that it was just a calm before the storm came. Slowly but steadily, everyone could hear a slight tremor and notice the slight movement of the earth. Sensing the changes happening around them, they looked ahead to see birds flying into the sky making sharp croaking noises as if they were alarming them. The trees began to shake left and right, and finally, they noticed a faint movement within the thick and dense forest. And to their utter horror, they saw a huge lion walking orderly towards them. Alex's expression turned sharp at the sight of them and he tightened his grip on his sword. In front of him, there was an entire battalion of wolf tribesmen and orcs who seemed to be fully prepared for war. Scanning them, Alex found that there were nearly 150 to 200 wolf tribesmen and around 500 orcs marching towards them. And their combined strength was not something to be sniffed at. He could even sense a master rank among the wolf tribesmen, who seemed to be the chief of the tribe. In Nevin City, while Alex and his troops were fighting against the beastly tides, a certain figure was observing an amusing scene. In an abandoned alley, a girl was running at full speed while several figures were chasing her. Her clothes were in tatters and tears were running down her cheeks, which fell to the ground along with drops of blood. She was chased by these people who seemed to be groups of bandits. After the capital of Nevin began to prosper, many thieves and bandits began to bare their fangs. With Alex and the city crops spearheaded by Max in Ben's absence, they grew at an alarming rate and soon tried to cause as much chaos as possible. The girl was quite pretty, but more than that, she had something precious that caught the bandits' attention, and they thought that getting that thing and selling it would make them rich. The girl turned from left to right as she sped forward. Her chest rose and fell as her disheveled hair hid her face. One of her poor shoes didn't hold up to the torture and eventually broke as the girl ran and tripped. Ha 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 ha. Excellent girl. We told you to hand over the stuff to us and then we'll leave you safe, but you just have to go around and make things difficult for us. One of the men spoke. Now along with that, we'll also charge interest. You have to pay the interest with your body, girl. They all laughed and licked their lips as they saw the delicious food in front of them. One of them ran towards the girl and extended his hand towards her to pull her along. No. No. The girl screamed with a small hope that someone could save her at the last moment as she heard her scream. On her way she tried to call many for help, but upon seeing these beasts in man's skin everyone turned a blind eye. Most of the streets were desolate without a single person, and only people like these bandits roamed around in the deathly silence of the night. As the man was about to pounce on the delicate girl and raise his hand to hold her, he suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. His hand was just a few inches away from the girl's face, and to his utter horror, he was unable to move it any further and felt like his entire existence had frozen. His companions, who were laughing behind with a sinister smile, looked at him in annoyance and shouted, "What the hell? Are you so shocked by the witch's beauty that you froze for a moment? What an asshole," the man said and took a step forward, but just like the other guy, He was unable to move. And soon all the men present there noticed the anomaly that left them stunned. All of them were unable to move, and as they looked around to find the anomaly, they noticed small ropes tied to their body, and they had wrapped around every part of their body that had been tied tightly, hindering their movements. Who did this? Who the fuck are you? Everyone screamed, and getting no response, their gaze fell on the girl in front of them and shouted, "Are you the one who tricked us? I'm telling you, if you trick us, the consequences will be horrible. Phew 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 phew, consequences. Shouldn't you worry about yourself first?" A sweet and pleasant charming voice echoed in the alley, resonating in their eyes and causing them to look up in panic. Under the bright moon, there was a dazzling figure shining brightly under the darkness of the night. Chapter 70, Cut Them Down. All the men, along with the girl, looked up and were stunned to see what was happening. Standing on top of the roof was a woman wearing black clothes, and her face was covered with a veil while her wings, which reached down to her waist, fluttered and danced crazily in the air. The tight clothing couldn't hide her curves but instead made her figure hotter and more voluptuous. Gulp. The men gulp as they look at her, and even the girl couldn't help but take a glance to praise her beauty. That seemed quite unreal. She didn't know who she was, but at least her presence had delayed the inevitable. "Oh. You can look at me all you want, men. After all, this is your last night," she spoke in a soft and innocent voice filled with warmth and love that clouded the men's minds, but only she knew that her voice was their death sentence. She raised her fingers and twirled them as she fiddled with them a little. With a flick of his finger, the ropes wrapped around everyone in motion, holding them tightly. The dim moonlight reflected off the ropes, and many found that the entire area had been covered in dimly glowing ropes. And with a flick of his finger, the ropes surrounding the people tightened and cuts appeared on their wounds, and blood dripped from the wounds and began to dye the rope. All the men let out cries of horror and began to beg. "Please forgive us, have mercy, we will leave the place immediately. Please forgive us." People screamed and moaned in pain as they found themselves in a life-threatening situation. Such a sweet and nice voice. "Didn't you want to do things with a girl? Why don't you try it now?" the woman spoke in a soothing tone. The words choked in the men's throats as they heard the words of the woman, who seemed to enjoy watching their agony. Seeing them staring at her with their mouths open, she clicked her tongue. "Tisk. Tisk. You're no fun," the woman said and clenched her fist. Swiss. All the ropes vibrated, after which blood splattered and a deadly agony permeated the atmosphere, and with this many pieces of limbs fell off. The men's heads popped and burst like watermelons. The girl looked at the horrific scene and was completely disgusted at the sight of the cruel scene. The head, limbs, arms and every piece of her body were cut off by the ropes. Blood splattered on her face, making her want to vomit. She turned her head and looked away, but as soon as she turned her head, a shadow appeared before her, and the woman appeared before her in an instant and held her chin. "What a beauty," the woman said with a smile under her veil. Please don't kill me," the girl murmured after gathering her strength. "Don't worry, you're safe now. No scum will dare to lay a hand on you from now on," the woman spoke, and her figure disappeared in an instant into the darkness of the night, leaving the girl shocked. A figure like a lightning bolt appeared before an old, dilapidated building. Knock, knock, knock. Hearing the sound of footsteps, the guards wanted to ask who came here, but upon seeing the woman dressed in black, they bowed their heads and pushed open the door. "This servant greets the queen," the woman nodded, entered the dilapidated building, and walked towards the underground basement. Many people dressed in black clothes were stationed there, and each of them had the rank of a squire. They all greeted her as she walked past them and entered an open space. In the center was a huge throne. Ignoring everyone, she walked over and sat on the throne with her legs crossed. Seeing her take the position, many people present bowed and spoke. "We greet the Queen of Shadows, we greet the Queen of Shadows." The woman's eyes were as sharp as a sword, and she had a helpless expression on her face. Only those who held high positions knew that this lady was none other than their queen. During the day, she was the king's wife and was caretaker and took care of official matters, while at night she became the Grim Reaper of the night. The entity that lurks in the shadows and hunts in the shadows, preventing any misfortune from occurring in Nevin in the absence of her lord. If Alex was present now, he would have screamed and asked who she was, what had happened to my lovely, sweet, innocent Rilla, who always had a smile on her face. "Kadger, how is the situation, Your Highness?" "The situation is quite strange. In recent days, there has been an influx of mercenaries into Nevin. We have not been able to discover the cause of this, but the mercenaries are causing trouble, and they cut them down," Before Kadr could finish the report, he heard Ridaya's words, and the words that were about to come out almost choked in his throat. Your Highness. This, I said to finish them off. Anyone who dares to cause trouble will be disrespecting the new laws and order of Nevin established by my lord, which is like going against my lord. It is necessary to kill these kinds of scum. It is better to cut off the weeds before they fully grow. They are lucky that my lord is not present, otherwise even a simple death is also a blessing for them. Hearing Ridaya's words, everyone felt a chill run down their spine. No one can deny this matter. If Alex was here, probably the entire capital would already be dyed in blood. Alex would even initiate the blood festival where the person who killed the most would be awarded. Everyone could imagine the scene of Alex hanging the naked mercenaries on display like a piece of art and screaming at the top of his lungs. Come and experience Nevin's exclusive heavenly treatment, full of benefits. If you want to experience Nevin's heavenly treatment, you just need to commit a crime, after which you will be pleasured by us like never before. Then, hurry up. Everyone imagined the same thing and their bodies trembled in fear. Kadr, send out the entire Nighthawk squadron and also keep an eye on Wright's border. I feel that Wright had been preparing for war. We need to send some troops in case of war, so I want some of you to infiltrate Amidon, Ridaya ordered. Ridaya knew Catherine's character. Unless necessary, she did not ask others for help and tried to do everything on her own. Moreover, knowing that the war was approaching, she would be quite busy and might not have heard about the recent events in Nevin. So, Ridaya had to leave everything to her lord so that he would not have to wait to act. Also, she did not want her lord to return and see Nevin in such a disastrous state. Without Alex, it was her duty to handle all things, and she wanted to do it perfectly so that she could prove herself worthy of Alex's trust and to be one of his wives to stand by his side. After all, out of all of her lord's wives, she was the only one who did not have an official status like all the others. Now retreat, Ridaya ordered. As soon as they left, Ridaya sighed deeply and looked at the ceiling that had gaps and the moonlight shining brightly between the chasms. Looking at the bright moon, Ridaya muttered in a disheartening tone, My lord, when will you return? Without you everything seems stale. Do you think of me the way I think of you? Chapter 71, We Swear Our Eternal Loyalty. In front of Steelfield Fortress. All the soldiers had gathered in front of the fortress and raised their swords. They were all tense and a little nervous seeing such a strong lineup. The massive number of wolf tribe and orc troops lined up before them. Furthermore, the lowest rank they had was a squire, while many of those on their side hadn't even awakened their mana. A wolf tribesman stepped forward. He stood 3 meters tall and had 2 large deep scars on his chest and had whitish fur along with sharp canines and long claws. Alex felt that he was the chief of the wolf tribe. Fear not, human, we mean you no harm, the chief of the wolf tribe said loudly. Alex didn't lower his weapons but instead increased his vigilance and looked at Hamilton, who nodded briefly. Alex stepped forward and stood in front of the fortress and said, I am Alex, the king of Nevin. What do you mean by bringing all your troops in front of Steelfield Fortress? You want to wage war against us? Alex spoke in a cold and cutting tone. Alex knew that these were natives of this place and had lived here for centuries alongside the humans and had not caused any disasters, but seeing their lineup, Alex decided to take a firm stance from the start. The expressions of the wolf tribe members and the orc hardened a little upon hearing Alex's introduction and his cold words. They did not imagine that they would meet the king of this land here under such conditions. The wolf tribe chief looked at Orc and gained his approval as he walked forward. He gently bowed to Alex and said, I am Bru, the chief of the wolf tribe. I am Castle, the chief of the orc tribe. One of the large and burly orcs stepped forward and spoke as he slammed his large wooden mace on his shoulder as he stared at Alex. Orcs were the warriors who respected and worshipped strength, but upon seeing Alex, he snorted in disdain as he felt that Alex was rather weak being the king of the nation. He looked rather weak and even the people behind him seemed to be strong. While the wolf tribesmen had the same thought, they could sense a faint sense of danger from Alex. The wolf tribesman was said to be close to Mother Nature and could sense many things that others cannot, and at that moment, all of Peru's senses were screaming that he should not offend this guy. Peru knew that Castle was not good with the words, and he can already see a hint of disdain towards Alex in Castle's eyes, to which he can only sigh and let nature take its course. Alex, your majesty, we are not here for any war or trouble. Since the Steelfield Fortress was established decades ago, we have never attacked it. We do not have any hostility towards humans and we are already happy with what we have, but recently we are facing trouble in the forest. That is why we wanted to ask for the active cooperation and support. Peru said with a gentle nod. Alex was quite surprised by Peru's tone. He did not seem like the type of person who would speak up, putting aside his arrogance and treating the other party with respect. But his polite way of speaking proved once again that appearances can be deceiving. Besides, Alex did not know what was going on inside the forest and thought that this might be a good opportunity to uncover some mysteries, but he was unsure whether to believe in them or not. "Could you please specify the situation for me so that I can get a general idea?" Alex asked. Peru nodded and began to explain the recent events. The entire forest that existed for unknown centuries without any problems had suddenly become a place full of traps and deceit. And it all started a few months ago when the monsters and beasts suddenly became unusually strong and started the massacre. Usually, there were many small groups in the forest, and each of these monster groups had their own area to hunt, and they didn't usually interfere or hunt in others' territory. But suddenly they started causing a ruckus wherever they went, and moreover, it wasn't for food because they kept killing and didn't even care about hunting. Their tribe of wolves and orcs were the main species in the forest, and we have a huge village along with the territory. From time to time they would have some small skirmish with the orcs and fight 1 or 2 battles with them, although there was no deep enmity between them. Peru explained and spoke in a solemn voice. "Our children train and hunt in the forest, and with the unusual activity happening around, all of their lives were in danger, so we put aside our grievances and started an alliance to find the root of the problem. Even so, we failed and were unable to discover anything even after our mad search. Instead of discovering the root cause of the problem, our alliance that had gone out to find it turned into beasts and fought each other. Many of my wolf tribe members had lost their senses and began to fight frantically with increased strength and endurance, and the one bearing the brunt is none other than us. As the wolf tribes were born with natural affinities, each of us can awaken quite easily and mostly use mana, and those who have fallen into madness mostly have their mana channels and roots messed up. Orcs generally don't use mana and rely mainly on their superior strength and fast regeneration unlike us, so only a handful of them were able to awaken their mana, and their side suffered significantly less compared to us. For a moment we thought that what they were doing was weakening our forces and taking away our numbers. After countless heated discussions, we finally concluded that it wasn't orcs doing. We weren't able to figure it out. While more and more of my tribe's wolves were losing their lives, Peru raised his head and spoke in a gentle tone. "I can't just stand by and watch my people lose their lives. That's why I came up with the idea of asking you humans for help. Your Majesty, please help my tribe. In the name of the goddess nature, we swear our undying loyalty to you." Peru spoke and bowed his head in respect. Chapter 72, Confrontation against the Orc Boss. Alex's eyebrows furrowed as he couldn't believe the way the events unfolded. It was too fast for even his brain to process. It's like a shock when one day you wake up and see people standing on your steps swearing allegiance. Firstly, he was sure of one thing: it didn't matter that swearing the name of the goddess wasn't a casual thing, and once you had made the oath you had to follow it with all your heart, and a single disobedience in following an oath that was made in the name of a god or goddess will bring a calamity upon you and your family. The second thing was that Alex didn't know whether to laugh or cry upon hearing Peru's words. Getting the wolf tribe on his side will surely increase Nevin's fighting strength. Move aside, there are still orcs left who could follow him as well. Thinking it over happily, he looked at Orc and asked, "Castle, what do you think?" Castle looked at Alex with disdain and walked towards him and snorted, "You're weak." Alex frowned upon hearing Orc's words. "Did you forget that I'm the king of Nevin?" Alex said with a soft smile. He wasn't showing off his status but was trying to test this orc's reaction. "King of Nevin." The orc muttered as he dropped the mace on his shoulders on the ground and without warning, slammed it towards Alex. Bang! A loud bang was heard, and it crashed into the ground making a crack in front of Alex. "Prove yourself." Castle didn't hit Alex, but the ground in front of him, but he was pleasantly surprised that Alex didn't blink or take a step back. Good, good. You're very brave, Castle. I like associating with people like you," Alex said with a smile as he dropped his weapons and signaled a man to come over to him. When the man reached Alex, he pulled out his sword and axe and gave them to the man and walked in front of Orc and said, "I've heard Orc worship fortresses, so let's fight to see who worships who. The winner will follow the loser," Alex said in an arrogant tone. "Foolish human. You should know your place," Castle said, throwing the mace aside and standing in front of Alex. "Remember the promise," Castle said as he didn't believe in these greedy and lying humans. Everyone's hearts froze when they saw that Alex wanted to directly confront the Orc chief. Hamilton clenched his fists, as he thought that he should be the one to fight the orc instead of Alex. Furthermore, the orc was already at the rank of half-step master while Alex hadn't awakened mana. Although he knew that Alex had a high physique, he didn't think it was enough to defeat such a large orc whose muscles seemed to be protruding from their spot. The other's heart sank along with the illusion of the earth resonating as Castle stomped the ground hard trying to intimidate Alex. Castle slowly lowered his head and placed his large, ferocious hand right in front of Alex's face and pointed at his chin as he opened his mouth. "You're a king, so what? The king needs power, but with a thin and slender body like yours, I can snap you like a dry twig," Castle sneered. Alex didn't reply but gave a beautiful smile that made him look like a male angel descended to earth. "You?" Castle was surprised to see Alex smirk instead of cursing at him, which was the very nature of humans who always start barking out of simple intimidation, and it was mostly in the case of nobles who enjoy status. As Castle was about to speak further and try to test Alex's patience, bang! Q-weak! A pig-like squealing sound was heard coming from the brave orc, as Castle groaned in pain and staggered back a few steps. "Wow, huh?" Everyone stared in disbelief, and even the orcs were taken by surprise as Alex had just delivered a headbutt straight to the chieftain's head without any fear. Blood started dripping from Alex's head a bit as Castle was far from fine and shook his head to get clarity. Oh, Castle was rubbing his head when another blow jolted him and slammed him into the ground. Bang! "Enough strength for a chief of an orc tribe?" Alex said with the same gentle smile. Castle got up from the ground and stood up with a hand on his nose and a scowl on his face. He let go of his nose that was covered in blood and his nose was bleeding from the previous hit. He looked at Alex in surprise as he thought to himself, "What the hell? This little bag of bones hit hard even though he hadn't awakened mana. Is he just like us who have superior strength?" But looking at his body, it didn't seem like it. He sneezed out the blood and looked at Alex with a serious expression. All the humans were shocked to see Alex, who was able to make an orc bleed with just a headbutt and a punch when before his wooden arrows weren't even able to pierce the orc's skin. How horrible. Castle intertwined his fingers and made them crack. They were as big as wooden branches. Intense killing intent radiated from Castle's eyes. He rushed towards Alex, making the earth rumble. Alex followed Castle's idea and rushed towards Castle as the armor he was wearing made a clang sound that reverberated throughout the field. Stopping in front of Castle, Alex took advantage of the momentum of his movement and punched the orc. Castle followed the idea and punched Alex. Boom! A deafening roar shook the entire place, and the impact site was blown away, forming a large crater as rocks and debris were instantly crushed around Alex and Castle, followed by a huge shockwave of dust. Alex didn't back down and jumped forward as he twisted his body and kicked Castle. Castle raised his hand to block him, but Alex's kick forced him to tilt his body. He raised his hand and grabbed Alex's leg and wanted to throw him, but Alex wrapped his arms around Castle's neck and tried to strangle him. Chapter 73, Confrontation against the Orc Boss 2. Alex's upper body was wrapped around Castle like a snake as Castle tried to pull Alex's leg and tear it apart, but Alex used his other leg to wrap around his hands and pinned him to the ground. What? KHHKKK. Castle moaned as his throat was muffled by Alex's tightly wrapped hands as his hands curled around his hands and pulled them down. He clenched his other hand and used his free hand to punch Alex. Bang! 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 Alex felt a pain in his lower abdomen after receiving Castle's elbow, but he gritted his teeth to suppress the pain. Castle found it difficult to shake off Alex, who resisted the pain of the punch and thoughts about something and began to roll on the ground. Alex noticed Castle's intentions and loosened his arm around his neck and jumped from his back, but as soon as his grip loosened, Castle punched Alex, giving him a powerful blow. Alex raised both his arms to defend himself, but the blow sent him flying several distances. Alex twisted his body in the air and landed on both his legs. He looked at his arms and saw a small red and swollen spot on them, which was due to Castle's punch. His hands felt numb and heavy for a moment. "Orcs sure hit hard," Alex muttered. Castle coughed loudly as he felt like his windpipe in his neck was about to be crushed by Alex. He coughed and spat on the ground and pounded his chest muscles like he was beating war drums and warned Alex to know his limit. "Interesting," Alex laughed as Castle closed the distance in the blink of an eye and threw an arm swing at Alex. Alex leaned forward, twisted his body downwards and dodged the punch as Castle threw another punch at Alex. Alex closed the distance and dodged by leaning his body to the side as soft air brushed past his face as Castle's fists flew past Alex. Letting the punch pass, Alex clenched his fist tightly and threw an uppercut. As Alex closed the distance and was quite close to Castle, and the distance between them was not even an arm's length, Castle tried to duck but was too late and Alex's punch hit his lower jaw. Bang! A small pop was heard and Castle's head spun upwards, but he didn't give up and threw both of his thick arms towards Alex, which Alex avoided by bending his body backwards and jumped back while doing a flip in the air to gain distance. After the close fight, Castle and Alex continued their game of catch, where Alex avoided Castle's grab and his attacks quite closely. The observer watching the battle was quite dumbfounded by the way the battle was going on. From a distance, it seemed like Alex was going to get hit by Castle's attack now and be hurt, but at the last second before impact, Alex, like an acrobat, would swing and rotate his body at an unprecedented angle and dodge the blow just as the blow was quite close to him. Slippery eel. Stop wasting time and fight me like a man, you damn coward, Castle roared. What the hell did you mean when you said I would fight you like a man? I've been a man since I was born. You can control me if you want, Alex said with a wide grin on his face. You? Castle felt like his sense of consciousness would diminish if he spoke to this man. After initiating a play to catch Alex, Castle was starting to get tired. Hush, Alex breathed out and his eyes became sharp as he looked at Castle and muttered, I guess this is it for today. Playtime's over, time to get to work, Alex. Alex raised both his arms and assumed a boxing stance much to Castle's surprise. He didn't know why Alex suddenly changed his stance but he had a bad feeling about it. As Castle was ready to charge forward, he suddenly saw Alex's image blur on the spot and feeling a sense of crisis behind his back, he turned his body and punched backwards towards Alex as he waited for his attack to collide with Alex. But what his fist met wasn't Alex but only his afterimage left by Alex. Castle's pupil contracted as his eyeball popped out and he frowned as Alex disappeared behind his back and appeared in front and smashed Castle's face with his fist. Ba-ong. Castle felt as if the world was spinning around him and before he could regain his senses, Alex twisted his body in the air and used all of his momentum to kick Castle's head. His kick carried all of his momentum and connected with a loud thud, slamming Castle's head into the ground. Aum. With a thunderous noise, a crater was formed and Castle's head was dug into the ground by Alex's kick. He seemed to be buried beneath the ground with a wide crater as dust and debris flew around him. The entire place fell silent at the sight of Castle being knocked out in such an embarrassing manner. Everyone was sure that Alex was just playing around and just as he got serious, Castle was completely destroyed by him. While many admired him and looked at him in awe and respect, the orcs rushed towards their boss and tried to pull him out of the crater. Alex watched the scene with a stern expression. Many thought that he had beaten Castle, but he knew that was far from the truth. The reason he won was that when he allocated all 4 stat points to the strength and agility stats, which made him feel quite refreshed and he felt like all his pain was gone and his body felt like it had been revitalized even after a long battle throughout the night. Also, Alex knew that Castle could use mana to strengthen himself, but he didn't use it because he looked down on Alex and might have thought it was beneath him to use mana to defeat him. Chapter 74, Guided by Mother Nature. In a dark, lightless room that looked like a basement, Alex sat there accompanied by Count Hamilton while Peru and Cass, the orc chieftain, whose face was swollen like a pig's, examined the dead orc killed by Alex and Ian earlier. Hamilton patted Alex on the shoulder and said, Alex, are you okay? Before fighting Castle, they had already fought all night and seemed to be quite tired, and fighting Castle might have exhausted them and they might have some injuries on their bodies, Hampton said with concern as he saw Alex's indifferent look. A warrior must always take care of his body and try to stay in the best condition possible as no one knows what could happen the next moment. Thus, along with training, it is necessary to get enough rest so as not to become mentally exhausted. I'm fine, Uncle Hamilton. Thank you for worrying about me, Alex said in a gentle tone as he let Hamilton pat him on the shoulder, which made him feel like his nephew. Alex leaned back in his chair and looked at Castle and Peru, who were completely immersed in staring at the corpse. So how is he? Alex asked loudly. Peru and Castle turned around and both seemed to have a solemn expression, as if they had stepped in some shit. Your Highness, I think your point of view is correct, Peru said and walked towards Alex. Before, the beastmen who had wreaked havoc among the wolf tribes had the same symptoms and did not have such signs or scars. The dead orc clearly showed signs of abuse and could have been used as a lab rat. Alex nodded upon hearing Peru's words and looked at Castle whose eyes were already bloodshot and was breathing heavily. Alex could see that Castle was angry, but if you think he was angry at him, you're wrong. Those damn sons of bitches. I'll make sure to whip them and skin them alive and then stomp on their corpses and turn them into meat paste, Castle roared in anger, which shook the entire basement for a moment. Alex frowned as he watched Castle's behavior. Isn't this bastard copying my style? It's not that Castle is copying your style. It's you who behaves like a barbarian without any shred of dignity. Sometimes, I even wonder how you could live in such a civilized society and behave in such an uncivilized manner like an animal. A thick vein bulged on his forehead, and he wanted to say that the 14 generations of the system are animals, but he realized that he has no generations, so he wiped away the annoying voice of the system while complaining to the goddess for not adding a mute button in the stam system. Alex ignored the system's ramblings and focused on the things in his hands. Peru and Castle, tell me if there are any dangerous beasts inside the forest and tell me what the inside of the forest is like, Alex said. Peru nodded and said, although there are many monsters and beasts inside the forest, it is not as dangerous as you humans make it out to be. After all, this forest is not a forbidden zone and is just one of the territorial distinctions between your Nevin and the Bright Kingdom where the land had not been cleared for centuries. Alex pondered for a moment as his expression hardened and asked in a stern voice, Peru, since there are 2 kingdoms beside the forest, tell me, why did you choose Nevin? Since you already have a general knowledge of the Nevin and Bright Kingdom, you would surely know about the political situation of both kingdoms and how Nevin had fallen, yet you still came to ask for shelter. It seems rather strange, doesn't it? Alex asked with a smile as he waited to see the two's reactions. Hamilton frowned upon hearing Alex's words and increased his vigilance. In fact, he was also thinking the same thing, but seeing that there was no concern on Alex's face, he figured that Alex might have already thought of that. Peru looked at Castle, who spoke with a snort. In truth, I was planning to go to the Bright Kingdom, but this mad dog brought me here. I see that's why he was in a bad mood until I crushed him, Alex muttered to himself as he kept his gaze fixed on Peru, trying to notice any subtle changes in his expression, even if it could be on a microscopic level. Peru's lips curved upwards, showing his white teeth along with fangs, and said, Nevin wasn't her choice to ask for help, and I even thought that going to Nevin was just a waste of time, and this stronghold might fall soon. No matter how powerful this place may be, it had still depended on the inner capital for supplies of weapons and manpower, but since Nevin's capital is in chaos, it was bound to fall. Stop. Stop. How the hell did you know so much, when everyone remained locked in the forest? Alex asked with a surprised look. This man has his intelligence agency, Alex thought to himself. Birds singing, Peru spoke up and explained, we can either tame birds, or some of our wolf tribe members had the power to summon birds, which we distributed nearby to gather information. Jackpot, Alex said as his eyes sparkled as if he had won $1 billion. What? Peru asked. Oh. Nothing, you can continue with the story. Sorry, I was getting off topic. As I said, we were going to Bright but changed our minds in the middle. As you know, we have a great affinity with nature, and we can hear the voice of nature guiding us in times of need. So, we listened to the voices of nature to seek you out and ask for help. I might not have known the reason before, but now, seeing you, I think it might be the right decision. Besides, Mother Nature will never give us a wrong suggestion. Chapter 75, Exploring the Depths of the Forest. Alex was taken aback for a moment. So, it was the call of nature. I see, Alex muttered and looked up as he thought about which goddesses had participated in one, but whatever their intention was, he was happy to obtain free slaves. He meant good subordinates. Besides, he knew that goddesses are not omnipotent beings that control everything. The only thing that controlled everything was fate, and even the goddess couldn't escape the bonds of fate. Although he didn't know what fate had in store for them, he wasn't one to refuse free servants. After all, it would be rude to do so. Since Mother Nature had sent them to him, he would make sure to utilize them properly. They stayed in the fortress and helped them fend off the beast. Their presence was enough to scare the beasts and monsters, who already knew that these beastmen could be said to be the rulers of the forest. Seeing the tide of beasts and monsters subside, they discussed and settled things and decided to form a squad and head into the forest on the other side. Everyone had a feeling that Pride might have something to do with creating all of these problems. It's too dark, it doesn't seem like a good time to take a walk right now, Alex said with a smile. His eyes swept over everyone as he walked to the center of the 50-person squad, where there were many oddballs present. His squad consists of a wolf pup, a two-faced monster orc, and some seemingly docile servants who can bite your back when given the chance. A squad led by Peru and Castle accompanied him while Ian took care of keeping order. The orcs and the wolf tribe unconsciously parted to let him cross. The tension in the forest was as tight as a bowstring. They were traversing the forest at night so they could reach the other end during the day. If it was just Alex and his human squad, he wouldn't agree to march into a forest that might be filled with traps at night, but he had groups of monsters with him who have quite a bit better eyesight than humans and can even see at night, unlike humans. Alex stood in front of them and said, "From now on we have to be careful. First of all, don't forget that from now on the forest territory is under Bright's control, and I don't think they had a screw loose that wouldn't set traps or preventative measures that would allow the intruder to pass through." Everyone looked at each other and nodded. "And one more important thing, I don't want any disobedience. I don't care if you're human, a beast, or a monster. On this mission, we're allies and we all have to watch each other's backs, and if any of you try to stir up trouble, I'll make sure to reward you appropriately," Alex said with a mocking smile that sounded like the words of the devil in the ears of those who heard it. The deeper they went into the mountain path, the more desolate the landscape became. There was almost no vegetation on the ground and the path, void of life, was littered with crisscrossing rocks that looked like sharp fangs. Between the cracks in the walls, brambles and withered grasses grew. In the distant darkness, withered trees seemed to appear. The cold wind could be heard blowing through the branches of the trees like ghostly whispers that echoed from time to time in the ears of the listeners. Alex looked around and saw that the trees were unusual and drained the nutrients from the soil, turning this into a barren desert that people came to know. He raised his flame torch and occasionally, corpses of decrepit skeletons appeared in the shadows. They seemed to be small, weak beasts that had accidentally broken into this area and turned into dead meat. Max followed agilely with his flashlight in one hand, while clutching his bag with the other and looking around with curiosity and tension. This was the first time he had traveled so far from the human path while exploring the forest, and with a hint of excitement he muttered, "It's so exciting." Ian and Ben, who heard his words, almost tripped and fell on their backs upon hearing Max's words. "What's so exciting about this place?" Ben shouted. Max scratched his cheek in embarrassment and said, "Haven't you heard ghost stories about your grandparents' wonderland? It's so fascinating and heartbreaking and I've always wanted to experience it." Ian's lip twitched a few times as he muttered, "Anyone who can tolerate the king will never be sane." Although he could feel his sanity fading after staying and getting used to Alex, he shook his head to clear his thoughts and said, "You two don't waste your time on these meaningless things. You two are commanders, so behave like ones." Ben wanted to shout that he was being wrongly accused, but Ian already expected Ben to say some nonsense to counter Max. Hearing Ian's stern words, both Max and Ben lowered their heads in shame. At the back, the expression was still quite good, but on the contrary, the atmosphere at the front of the march was rather depressing. Peru gritted his teeth as he saw the devastated scene. All the trees were withered, and the only thing that could be seen here were bones and corpses lying here and there. They were considered children of Mother Nature, and seeing the nature here devastated to such an extent pained him greatly. It seemed as if this entire place was cursed to a great extent. "Peru, I remembered you telling me that you inspected this place. So, was it like this before?" Alex asked with a solemn expression. "No, Your Highness. This place wasn't like this. It hadn't even been a month since we inspected it and this place had become like this. It was filled with lush, green trees while many beasts and monsters hunted here and there," Peru spoke and explained. As they moved forward, Peru suddenly halted his steps and shouted, "All stops now." Alex frowned and raised his hand for the soldiers to stop. "Peru, what happened?" Alex asked. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.